Chapter 720. Feng Manlu had always been gentle and calm. Even when facing his enemies, he would spare their lives if they weren't evil. However, at this moment, Feng Manlu's hair was fluttering in the wind and his face was cold. His empty eyes seemed to emit an unparalleled chill. A gust of piercingly cold sword chi exploded in the void. Feng Manlu was really angry. Digging your own grave. Ha! Who is the one digging his own grave today? Yi Guqin must die today. Xian Wuji said coldly. 10 years ago, after the battle at the Forbidden City Summit, you attacked my divine palace. 10 years later, I will not let such a tragedy happen to my disciple. Feng Manlu stood high in the sky and looked at Xian Wuji coldly. He was like a lonely sword that was about to be unsheathed. However, his words caused a stir in the surroundings. Could it be that the rumor from 10 years ago is true? Is the one who destroyed the Wind Sword King's divine palace really Xian Wuji? If the Wind Sword King's divine palace had not been destroyed, how strong would he be now? He would be able to suppress the entire empire. Even the War Emperor and Xian Wuji would not be his match. Feng Manlu's words caused a huge commotion. The hundreds of thousands of people present were in an uproar. There had always been a rumor that the one who had attacked Feng Manlu was Xian Wuji. However, there was no evidence and Feng Manlu had never said it publicly. Therefore, only a small number of people, including the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, believed it. However, Feng Manlu had said it himself. Given Feng Manlu's character, would he lie? At this moment, hundreds of thousands of people present looked at Xian Wuji. Most of the people believed Feng Manlu. Nonsense. Feng Manlu, is this the only way you can change the topic and save your disciple? Xian Wuji's face was calm and he was not moved at all. However, a cold light flashed in the depths of his black and white eyes. God is watching. Ask your heart whether it is true or not. Today, if you attack my disciple again, don't blame my divine wind sword for being merciless. Feng Manlu slowly raised his hand. Vaguely, a green longsword could be seen within his body. As the green longsword appeared, the airflow between heaven and earth seemed to surge. 10 years of accumulating a sword. Although Feng Manlu was a heaven and earth spirit bridge, its strength made even divine dwelling experts tremble in fear. Feng Manlu, you do have some skills. However, no one can save him today. Xian Wuji, the Yin-Yang Elders, Xian Tai, the Battle Emperor, the Spirit Emperor, the Flame Emperor, and the Sealed Saber Royal Hall Master. A total of 8 divine dwelling experts stepped forward at the same time, their auras sweeping across the sky and suppressing the world. Hundreds of thousands of people trembled under the pressure of the auras of these 8 powerhouses. This was the power and influence of a divine dwelling expert. On the other side, Yan Chang'e, Feng Manlu, Qiu Shan, Sect Master Jiu Xian, Vice Sect Master Qing Yang, and the Palace Master of Centauria stepped out at the same time. Although there were only 2 of them, their aura was not weak at all. Sensing the impending storm, the hundreds of thousands of people began to retreat toward the periphery of the battlefield. Of course, they didn't leave. It was rare to see a conflict at the divine dwelling level, let alone a duel between 2 great factions. However, if they were too close, they would definitely be affected. Thus, they retreated to a distance to watch the battle. Yi Guqin, Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, and the others hurriedly brought Yi Guqin back to the Sword Sect's Tower Forest camp. Yi Guqin was seriously injured and didn't have the slightest strength to fight. However, even if he was at his peak, he still wouldn't be able to deal with a divine dwelling expert. Sure enough, they will make a move. Yi Guqin sneered. The ancient god heart in his body throbbed vigorously, and the ancient god blood gushed out to heal his injuries. Yi Guqin also took out many pills and swallowed them, temporarily stabilizing his injuries. Yi Guqin had already expected the Battle Emperor, Xian Wuji, and the others to make a move. As for the Saint Origin Academy and Yuan Master, he was a little surprised that they didn't make a move. Yi Guqin also knew that Yuan Master wasn't afraid of him, but the barbarian race. The Saint Origin dynasty and the barbarian race had signed a peace treaty not long ago. If Yuan Master and the Saint Origin Academy openly made a move against him, the barbarian race naturally wouldn't let it go. Yi Guqin shook his head and sighed, but today, you've miscalculated. So, you're determined not to hand over Yi Guqin? Xian Wuji's eyes flickered coldly. Ha, if I can't even protect a disciple, what right do I have to be the sect master of the Sword Sect's tower? Yen Chang'e laughed. There was another expert in the Sword Sect's tower, Yen Balin of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. If Yen Chang'e was really in danger, Yen Balin naturally wouldn't stand by and do nothing. Then, let's make a move. Xian Wuji unsheathed his long sword. He didn't say anything else. Yi Guqin was already the target of the Battle Emperor and Xian Wuji. This was because they had secretly watched the battle on the Forbidden City summit. Yi Guqin's potential and talent had shocked the two experts. If this were to continue, Yi Guqin would probably grow to be even stronger than Feng Manlu in less than 10 years. At that time, they would lose their status, the 3 imperial palaces, and the limitless sword sect. Back then, Xian Wuji had secretly destroyed Feng Manlu's divine dwelling because he felt that Feng Manlu was a threat. Now that another threat had appeared, Xian Wuji naturally had to eliminate him. Boom! In an instant, many divine dwelling experts unleashed their auras, stirring up the airflow between heaven and earth. Only the earth-shaking spiritual chi storm remained. If the divine dwelling experts attacked, their power would be earth-shattering. A great battle had broken out. It was as if dozens of stars had exploded. Unparalleled spiritual chi waves shook the surroundings. Yen Chang'e's cultivation had reached the 9th level of the divine dwelling realm. Feng Manlu's cultivation was comparable to the 6th level of the divine dwelling realm. For a moment, true chi spread out in all directions. The entire Forbidden City buzzed and trembled. This is a battle between divine dwelling experts. Yi Guqin took a deep breath. The battle between him and Gu Zun was shocking. But it was still a little weaker than the divine dwelling experts. However, Yi Guqin was now at the great profound martial realm. When he broke through the heaven and earth spirit bridge, his strength would be comparable to a divine dwelling expert. The power of the divine dwelling was not far away from him. A great battle had broken out. Although Yen Chang'e's side had 2 fewer people, his individual strength was very high. However, Xian Wuji and Zhan Huang had not unleashed their full strength. They seemed to be waiting for something. Qiu Shan, the first elder of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association, gathered the vigorous true qi in his body and slammed his palm toward Xian Tai. Xian Tai, die. After shouting out these words, his palm suddenly changed direction. It slammed into Yen Chang'e's back. Pfft! Yen Chang'e was caught off guard and spat out a mouthful of blood. He turned his head and fixed his gaze on Qiu Shan. First Elder, you. This scene caused everyone to be astonished. The people of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association were even more stunned. First Elder, what is going on? All the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association were dumbfounded as if they had been struck by lightning. Qiu Shan's foot flashed, and he directly landed beside Xian Wuji. Qiu Shan greets the sect master. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire place fell silent. Qiu Shan, one of the 3 experts of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association, was from the Limitless Sword Sect. Chapter 721. Everyone was stunned. They were dumbfounded by what they saw. As for the elders and disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, they were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out. How? How is this possible? Great Elder Qiu Shan, how is it possible? Elder Gu Tua, who was in the crowd of the Sword Sect Pagoda, trembled. He and many other elders of the Sword Sect Pagoda belonged to Qiu Shan's faction. When Yi Guqin first came to the Sword Sect Pagoda, Gu Tua had made things difficult for him. However, even Gu Tua and the others did not know Qiu Shan's true identity. He was a spy that the Limitless Sword Sect had planted in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Qiu Shan had been in the Sword Sect Pagoda for more than 10 years. Qiu Shan and Feng Manlu had always been at odds with each other, causing the Sword Sect Pagoda to be divided into two factions. However, at least it was for the good of the Sword Sect Pagoda. In the end, Qiu Shan's betrayal caused Gu Tuo and the other elders who had followed him to be ashamed and furious. Damn it! Gu Tuo and the others were filled with regret. Qiu Shan. You. Yan Chang'e covered his chest as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Chang'e, how are you? Are you okay? Feng Manlu rushed to Yan Chang'e's side. It has always been you, Qiu Shan. Yan Chang'e coughed out a mouthful of blood. He was furious. It's really him. Feng Manlu's face was cold. 10 years ago, after the sword duel with Yu Bufan, he was supposed to go to a secret place to recuperate. However, his spiritual palace was destroyed by the mysterious person that Xian Wuji had transformed into. As for that secret place, not many people knew about it. Qiu Shan was one of them. It seems like you were the one who leaked the news to Xian Wuji 10 years ago, Feng Manlu said coldly. I don't know what you are talking about. I have always been a member of the Limitless Sword Sect, Qiu Shan said calmly. Even if most people believed Feng Manlu, Xian Wuji and Qiu Shan would not admit that they had harmed Feng Manlu. However, the Sword Sect Pagoda is in danger, many martial artists who were watching the battle sighed. Yan Chang'e was the strongest in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Only Yan Chang'e was qualified to fight against Xian Wuji and the Battle Emperor. At this moment, Yan Chang'e had suffered a sneak attack from Qiu Shan. His strength had decreased by at least 30%. It was impossible for him to defeat Xian Wuji or the War Emperor. Qiu Shan joined Xian Wuji's side. The current situation was that Xian Wuji had 9 Divine Palace experts on his side. There were only 5 people on Yan Chang'e's side. Yan Chang'e himself was injured and his combat strength had dropped by 30%. I'm afraid the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest is in trouble today. The group of martial artists sighed. Damn it! Qing He and the other elders were furious, but given their strength, they could not intervene in a battle between divine dwelling experts. Yi Guqin, hurry up and leave. Elder Qing He said. Yi Guqin could be said to be the hope of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. As long as Yi Guqin was alive, it would only take a few years for him to become a divine dwelling expert. There's no need, Yi Guqin's face was calm as he adjusted his breathing. It was as if he did not care about the danger in front of him. Yi Guqin, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Elder Qing He shouted. That's right. Brother Yi, hurry up and leave. Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia and the others also spoke. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and patted little He, who was squatting on his shoulder. Squeak squeak. Little He's big black eyes widened as he playfully pulled on Yi Guqin's black hair. Yi Guqin. Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang and the others also wanted to say something, but stopped. They also wanted to persuade Yi Guqin to leave. But they knew that with Yi Guqin's character, he would never do such a thing. It seems that a blazing sun is about to fall before it can rise. Crown Prince Xinghong shook his head when he saw this scene. Who knows what the final outcome will be? Princess Feng Shi's lips curled into a smile. Yi Guqin is still going to die today. Princess Yuan Shi and the others were elated. Dying at the peak of his strength, Yi Guqin must be feeling very complicated. Crown Prince Yuan's expression was calm as if he was watching a show. He was confident that Yi Guqin would definitely die today. Rumble. Around the Forbidden Violet Mountain, the Divine Dwelling Realm battle continued. But the situation was completely suppressed by Xian Wuji and the others. Yan Chang'e was injured and couldn't use his full strength. Feng Manlu's expression was still cold as if he was waiting for something. Let me kill that little bastard. There were 9 people on Xian Wuji's side. Even if Yan Chang'e and the others went all out, they couldn't stop all of them. Xian Tai took advantage of the opening and charged toward the sword sect's people. If there was anyone who hated Yi Guqin the most, it would undoubtedly be Xian Tai. Yi Guqin had rejected Xian Tai's invitation at the Tianhuang Plains elite gathering. At the Northern Liang City Exchange, Xian Tai had severely injured Yi Guqin. In the end, Feng Manlu had cut off one of his arms. Therefore, Xian Tai's hatred for Yi Guqin couldn't be erased. Stop! Yan Bailan frowned and shouted in front of the sword sect's people. Although the sword sect's people had nothing to do with him, it was Yan Chang's sect. However, it was Yan Chang's sect after all. Yan Bailan could not turn a blind eye to it. You are. Xian Tai's face was full of surprise. Yan Bailan's faint aura made his expression turn grave. Hey, there are still experts in the sword sect's tower. No wonder Yi Guqin is so calm. The hundreds of thousands of people around suddenly understood when they saw Yan Bailan step out. This must be Yi Guqin's trump card. But at this moment, a faint voice sounded. Swallow Cloud Dynasty, right? Are you going to interfere? The person who spoke was none other than Xinghong Crown Prince. Sky Star Dynasty. Yan Bailan's expression changed slightly. He looked sideways again. When he saw Princess Fengxi, his expression darkened. Sky Star Dynasty and Phoenix Nye Dynasty were two top dynasties that his Swallow Cloud Dynasty could not afford to offend. Xinghong Crown Prince. Yi Guqin glanced coldly at Xinghong Crown Prince. He had never met Xinghong Crown Prince, but Xinghong Crown Prince wanted to kill him. Is it because of the primordial sword token or Princess Fengxi? Or both? Yi Guqin thought. There were only two reasons why Xinghong Crown Prince wanted to kill him. Swallow Cloud Dynasty, get out of the way, Xinghong Crown Prince scolded coldly. Yan Bailan's eyes were filled with anger. He clenched his fists tightly and retreated in the end. He wasn't afraid of Xinghong Crown Prince. He was just wary of Sky Star Dynasty and Phoenix Nye Dynasty. Second uncle. Yan Wushuang couldn't help but say. Yan Bailan and the others were her family, but now they were cowering and not helping. Cousin, that's Sky Star Dynasty and Phoenix Nye Dynasty. Our Swallow Cloud Dynasty can't afford to offend them. But don't worry, those people want Yi Guqin dead. You'll be fine, Yan Xiaotang said. Shut up. Yan Wushuang shouted coldly. Her eyes were red. She stood firmly beside Yi Guqin without hesitation. If they wanted Yi Guqin to die, they would have to step over her dead body first. Niece, you. Yan Bailan struggled. Me too. Su Jianshi smiled and stood on the other side of Yi Guqin. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Guqin, Elder Qinghe, and all the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest stood beside Yi Guqin. We'll live and die together with senior brother Yi. Their unyielding voices spread throughout the world. It moved the spectators. This is a sect. This is the power of the Sword Sect. Everyone exclaimed. How charismatic did a person have to be to make all the disciples in the sect swear to follow him to death? Cousin, you. Yan Xiaotang and the others stood alone on the other side. They were extremely embarrassed. Ignorant. Since that's the case, you'll all go to hell with Yi Guqin. Xian Tai's divine dwelling expert's power suddenly surged, and his palm pressed down on Yi Guqin and the others. Chapter 722. Everyone present stared at the scene unblinkingly. Many sword cultivators covered their eyes. They couldn't bear to see Yi Guqin die. Die. Xian Tai smiled coldly. His vital qi turned into a giant handprint and pressed down on Yi Guqin and the others like a corner of the sky. This handprint was going to kill everyone in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Yi Guqin. Su Jianshi and Yan Wushuang hugged Yi Guqin's arms tightly. Don't worry. None of you will die today. Yi Guqin stood there calmly, his lips curled into a cold smile. Just as the handprint was about to land. A faint old voice suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. Who dares to touch the barbarian race's young king? You? A figure suddenly flashed out of the void. It was a hale and hearty old man in a grey robe. He held a dragon-headed walking stick in one hand and grabbed Xian Tai's neck with the other. The palm print that was blasted out dissipated into the void. Xian Tai, who was majestic just a moment ago, was grabbed by the neck by the old man like a little chick. The person who appeared was First Elder Wan Yanlan. It's an expert from the barbarian race. Wan Yanlan's appearance shocked everyone. They were about to suffocate. Don't humiliate the young king. At the same time, 9 voices burst out at the same time. Amidst the hundreds of thousands of densely packed people, 9 vigorous auras suddenly erupted. Under the shocked and dumbfounded gazes of the crowd, the 9 figures rose into the air. Each of them was a divine dwelling expert. Heaven Barbarian King, Muran Bo, and the patriarchs of the various races. First Elder Wan Yanlan. A total of 10 divine dwelling experts appeared at the same time. Their auras instantly stirred up the world, and countless spiritual chi storms exploded. Everyone's mind buzzed as if thunder had exploded. 10 divine dwelling stage experts had appeared at once. Who could stand this? Am I seeing things? 10 divine dwelling experts. This is the barbarian race. Only the barbarian race can easily dispatch 10 divine dwelling experts. The sound of gasps resounded in all directions. Everyone's faces were filled with incomparable shock. They now knew that Yi Guqin's trump card was not Yen Balin, but the Berserker tribe. As the young king of the barbarian race, Yi Guqin could mobilize all the barbarian divine palace experts. You. Why are you here? At this moment, Xian Tai was curled up like a little chick, his eyes filled with shock and fear. Although he was a divine dwelling expert, he was considered to be at the bottom of the divine dwelling experts, not to mention that he had lost an arm. Let alone Wan Yanlan, any ordinary divine dwelling expert would be able to suppress him. Xian Tai simply could not understand why the barbarian race would suddenly appear here. Moreover, there were 10 of them at once. This was clearly not a temporary transfer. Thinking of this, Xian Tai turned his gaze towards Yi Guqin with extreme hatred. It's you, you little bastard. Xian Tai was so angry that his teeth were about to shatter. On the other side, Xian Wuji, Zhan Huang, and the others, who were in the midst of a chaotic battle, also furrowed their brows. The heart of the Sealing Blade Monarch Hall Master thumped. He suddenly realized that he might have made the wrong choice. As for Yan Chang'e, he breathed a sigh of relief. Feng Manlu's expression was calm from the beginning. He knew that the barbarian race would come to help. Yi Guqin had long expected that Xian Wuji and the others would definitely act after the Forbidden City Summit. Therefore, during the 3 days of free time after breaking through the chaotic sea of consciousness, Yi Guqin contacted Wan Yanlan and the others and led 10 divine dwelling experts to hide in the crowd. If nothing happened in the end, there was no need for them to show up. If a divine dwelling battle broke out, Wan Yanlan and the others would be a force that could crush everything. This time, the Limitless Sword sect and the other forces are finished. Everyone sighed inwardly. The young king cannot be humiliated. Whoever humiliates him will die. Wan Yanlan's old face was indifferent as he grabbed Xian Tai's hand and pinched it. No. Xian Tai let out a shrill scream. He couldn't accept it, he couldn't accept it. A dignified divine dwelling expert had died in such a humiliating and ridiculous way. If he could do it all over again, he certainly wouldn't be in a hurry to kill Yi Guqin. Crack. The sound of a neck bone breaking was heard. Xian Tai's head tilted, his eyeballs popping out, and blood gushed out of his mouth. The Sun Moon Hall Master of the Limitless Sword sect had died. Boom. The world was in an uproar. In the Saint Origin Empire, the divine dwelling experts were the top experts. Normally, it was impossible to see a divine dwelling expert die, but now, they witnessed it with their own eyes. Barbarian race, you're digging your own grave. Xian Wuji's eyes flashed coldly. Ha, can't you see the current situation clearly? Wan Yanlan sneered. They were the ones in danger. Kill. Without any hesitation, Wan Yanlan led the divine-dwelling experts of the barbarian race to join the battle. With the addition of Wan Yanlan and the others, the situation was reversed. Xian Wuji and the others were greatly suppressed. It seems that Xian Wuji, the War Emperor, and the others are unlucky today, some of the martial artists gloated. They couldn't stand Xian Wuji's domineering attitude and were willing to see him suffer. However, Yi Guqin's expression didn't relax in the slightest. It's too strange. Yi Guqin murmured. What do you mean? Yan Wushuang and the others asked. It's too strange that Xian Wuji and the others didn't retreat in such a situation. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. Logically speaking, the appearance of Wan Yanlan and the others meant that the situation was one-sided. However, Xian Wuji and the others didn't leave, which meant that they still had a trump card. Sect Master, we can't hold on much longer, the Yin-Yang elders said, vomiting blood. Xian Wuji's face was calm. At this moment, suddenly, starlight seemed to converge in the sky. The next moment, 5 figures in starry robes descended. It was another 5 divine-dwelling experts. Where did these divine-dwelling experts come from? Judging from their clothes, they should be from the same force. Everyone's eyes widened at the same time. Since when were divine-dwelling experts as common as cabbages that could jump out at any time? They're from the Heavenly Star Empire. On a mountain peak, Kenpo frowned slightly, his face cold. Generally speaking, the top empires wouldn't interfere in the games between the lower empires. However, the Xinghong Crown Prince and the others had sent people to intervene. Brother Yi is in trouble. Kenpo's brows were tightly knitted together. He had come out to travel alone and didn't have any experts accompanying him. Although the identity of the Sword Empire was feared, the Sword Empire obviously wouldn't target the Heavenly Star Empire for Kenpo alone. Therefore, Yi Guqin could only rely on himself to survive this tribulation. Of course, if Yi Guqin really faced death, Kenpo wouldn't sit idly by. The heaven prides of the other empires also recognized the identity of the divine-dwelling experts and exclaimed. The Heavenly Star Empire. Yi Guqin's gaze suddenly turned to the Xinghong Crown Prince, and the coldness in his eyes could no longer be suppressed. The Xinghong Crown Prince had sent 5 divine-dwelling experts to kill him. As if noticing Yi Guqin's gaze, the Xinghong Crown Prince sneered. Princess Feng, she frowned. You're intervening in the battle between the lower empires? Logically speaking, the top empires wouldn't intervene in the battle between the lower empires. But the Xinghong Crown Prince had sent people. Ha, I said that Yi Guqin must die today. Feng Shi, do you want to stop it? The Xinghong Crown Prince said. Princess Feng Shi's eyes flashed. She indeed wanted to protect Yi Guqin. Chapter 723. But Princess Feng Shi didn't do anything. Her phoenix eyes were flickering. If something really happened to Yi Guqin, she could just act again. With the appearance of the 5 from the Heavenly Star Empire, the situation was immediately reversed. But things weren't over yet. In another part of the sky, 3 more divine-dwelling experts appeared. The 3 divine-dwelling experts had covered their bodies with black cloaks, making it impossible for anyone to see through them. But there was no need to doubt the aura of a divine-dwelling expert. Where did these divine-dwelling experts come from? Everyone was petrified as they stared blankly. Today's battle situation was beyond everyone's expectations. They didn't think that so many divine-dwelling experts would appear. The 3 black-cloaked divine-dwelling experts had joined Xian Wuji's side. Yuan Master, you couldn't help but send people out. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. If there was no accident, the 3 cloaked experts were sent by the Yuan Master. He couldn't act himself, and he didn't dare to let Marquis Huntian and the others do it. So he could only be secretive. If he gambled correctly, it would be best if Yi Guqin died. If Yi Guqin didn't die in the end, Yi Guqin wouldn't have a reason to deal with the Yuan Master. Yuan Master, what a good plan. Yi Guqin smiled coldly. The 5 from the Heavenly Star Empire and the 3 cloaked experts acted. The situation was reversed once again. The Divine Dwelling experts of the Heavenly Star Empire were all at least at the 5th level of the Divine Dwelling realm. Coupled with the unique cultivation techniques and martial arts of the Heavenly Star Empire, they were very powerful. As for the 3 cloaked experts, although they were slightly weaker, they were still a force to be reckoned with. For a time, the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest fell into a dangerous situation again. Ha, Yi Guqin, are you satisfied with the death trap I prepared for you and the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest? In the crowd of St. Origin Academy, Prince Yuani's lips curled into a cold sneer. Although he wasn't strong, he had the role of acting as a middleman. The 3 imperial palaces, the Limitless Sword Sect, the Heavenly Star Dynasty, and the St. Origin Academy all had Prince Yuani's influence behind them. Yi Guqin, I admit that I'm not strong enough to kill you with my own hands, but I can toy you to death. Prince Yuani's eyes were filled with hatred. He and Yi Guqin were mortal enemies that could not be resolved. After such a long period of hard work, the secret of the immemorial sword token had been exposed. He had even treated himself as a dog and followed beside Crown Prince Xinghong. He had been waiting for this day, to witness Yi Guqin's death with his own eyes. However, even Prince Yuani did not know what kind of trump card Yi Guqin had. Even in the face of such danger, Yi Guqin's expression did not change in the slightest. If worse came to worst, he could just release Little Black Seal and kill all the Divine Dwelling experts in one fell swoop. Of course, Yi Guqin would only do this in the most critical situation. After all, he could only release Little Black twice. If he released the seal for the 3rd time, Little Black would completely lose control and turn back into the chaotic demon ape. Moreover, his memory would also be restored. Therefore, until the last moment, Yi Guqin would save as much as he could. Because he had a hunch that the St. Origin Empire would soon undergo drastic changes. Without Little Black as a trump card, Yi Guqin would have a hard time. As time passed, the battle between the Divine Dwelling experts also reached its climax. The ground around the Forbidden Purple Mountain was riddled with holes and countless ravines. The entire majestic Forbidden Purple Mountain was also shaken by the aftermath of the battle. Rocks tumbled down, and many cracks had appeared. If it weren't made of purple gold rock, it would have been razed to the ground. In the battle between the Divine Dwelling experts, the strongest were Zhan Huang, Xian Wuji, Yan Changge, and Wan Yanlan. They had all erupted with the strength of the 9th level of the Divine Dwelling. However, Yan Changge had suffered a sneak attack from Qiu Shan, which caused his battle strength to fall, making him weaker than Xian Wuji and Zhan Huang. God of War Art, Heaven Suppressing Seal. Zhan Huang pressed his hand down, as if the golden sky had fallen, turning into a golden seal that crashed down. Barbarian God Strike. Wan Yanlan also attacked, and the totem power of his entire body erupted. After being tempered by the blood of the ancient gods, Wan Yanlan's strength had also become stronger. The sound of a violent collision swept out in all directions. But on the other side, Yan Changge was retreating step by step. Every time he used a move, he would feel a sharp pain in his chest. Qiu Shan's palm was extremely insidious and contained a hidden force. As long as Yan Changge used his true qi, it would affect his wound. If Yan Changge was given time, he would definitely be able to resolve the hidden force. But at such a critical moment, how could Yan Changge have the time to adjust his breathing? Therefore, the more Yan Changge attacked, the more serious his injuries became. Today, let Yi Guqin be buried together with your sword sect's talon. Xian Wuji attacked again, and the Tai Chi Yin-Yang fish pattern behind him suddenly expanded. Yin-Yang sword principle, out. Xian Wuji's long sword swept out, forming a Yin-Yang sword domain. It's the Yin-Yang sword principle. Everyone exclaimed. They had previously seen the Yin-Yang sword intent on Xian Hao's body. And now, Xian Wuji was using the true peerless Yin-Yang sword principle. Misty Rain Imperial Sword. Yan Changa's sword swept out in a powerful manner. Rumble. Sword chi gushed out and swept out in all directions. However, the yin-yang sword domain directly destroyed Yan Changa's attack as it rotated. How is this possible? Everyone was shocked. Xian Wuji's strength was just too strong. Yan Changa's chest was injured again, and blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. Changa, back off. Let me do it. On the other side, Feng Manlu used his fingers as a sword and injured a divine dwelling realm expert. Then, he flashed over. Xian Wuji's strength is not simple, Yan Changa said in a deep voice. I know. Feng Manlu smiled faintly. Yan Changa nodded slightly. The two of them were best friends, and their tacit understanding over the years meant that they did not need to speak much. At this moment, the surrounding true qi was surging violently, and the sounds of the divine dwelling realm experts colliding rang out in all directions. Amidst the chaos, Xian Wuji and Feng Manlu stood facing each other. Everyone who was watching the battle from afar was watching nervously. If Feng Manlu's words were true, then he and Xian Wuji would have an irreconcilable feud. Senior Feng. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep. He could also feel that Xian Wuji's strength was not ordinary. However, Feng Manlu, like him, had the pride of a swordsman. 10 years of grudges would finally be put to an end by Feng Manlu. Xian Wuji, 10 years. Feng Manlu let out a long sigh. Xian Wuji held his sword horizontally, his face indifferent. Hearing Feng Manlu's sigh, the surrounding hundreds of thousands of spectators also sighed. If it was any other divine dwelling realm expert whose divine dwelling was broken, they would have gone crazy. They would even have the thought of killing themselves. However, Feng Manlu's willpower did not waver. Sword Sect Pagoda had gone into seclusion for 10 years, and he had completely comprehended the unity of man and sword. How many people had such willpower and temperament? The crowd was not surprised. If Feng Manlu had not broken the divine dwelling realm, he would have become the #1 sword Dao expert in the Saint Origin dynasty. However, all of this had been destroyed by Xian Wuji. Feng Manlu, although your strength is not bad, you have no chance against me. Xian Wuji's tone was indifferent. As his voice fell, an unprecedentedly terrifying aura surged out of his body. Along with it, a terrifying soul power swept out in all directions. Heavenly Palace Realm Sovereign. Countless people exclaimed, their faces filled with unprecedented shock. Chapter 724. The Divine Dwelling Stage and the Heavenly Palace Stage. The difference between one stage was like heaven and earth. The Divine Dwelling Stage could be considered as the strongest in some dynasties. But in the South Horizon region, it was much dimmer. The Heavenly Palace sovereigns were different. Even in a top-tier dynasty or even an overlord-level force, a venerable one would have a high status. Some of the kings in the top dynasties were even the top sovereigns. It could be said that once one stepped into the sovereign stage, he would be a true expert and a hero. But now, Xian Wuji had unleashed the strength of a sovereign stage expert, which shocked everyone. The heaven prides of the dynasties were still fine as at least there were sovereigns in their dynasties. But the natives of the Saint Origin dynasty were different as they had never seen a sovereign before. Everyone was stunned when they saw Xian Wuji unleashing the aura of a sovereign. Xian Wuji, you've taken that step. Not to mention the people from the Sword Sect Tower Forest, even the War Emperor revealed a look of surprise as his cold eyes darkened. Although they were in an alliance, they were not a whole. They just had the same goal. Xian Wuji had silently broken through to the venerable realm. In other words, Xian Wuji had become the strongest expert in the Saint Origin dynasty. On the other side, the Prime Master was hiding in the dark, and his face was solemn. Xian Wuji's breakthrough to the sovereign stage was not good news for the Saint Origin dynasty. In short, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Xian Wuji had shown his true strength and subdued everyone. Feng Manlu, do you have any last words? Xian Wuji said coldly. Since he had shown his true strength, he naturally had to solve all the problems today. He had to kill Feng Manlu and eradicate the Sword Sect Tower. If the Nine Profound Sect and the Rhino Divine Palace did not cooperate, they would be eradicated. Xian Wuji wanted the Limitless Sword Sect to dominate all the major forces in the Saint Origin dynasty. When the time was right, he would replace the Prime Master and lead the entire Saint Origin dynasty. This was Xian Wuji's ambition. Could it be that the Sword King is going to fall today? Everyone was looking at the scene. As the Sword King, Feng Manlu was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people in the Saint Origin dynasty and was regarded as a role model by many sword cultivators. And today, they might be witnessing the fall of the Sword King. Sovereign. Yi Guqin's face darkened. This was something he hadn't expected. Even though Xian Wuji had just become a venerable not long ago, he was still a venerable. A first-layer venerable was many times stronger than a ninth-layer divine dwelling. It was a qualitative change. Even so, Yi Guqin's expression remained unchanged. If Feng Manlu was really in any danger, he could just release Little Black Seal. Although the opportunity was precious, it was nothing compared to Wine-Sweeping Tower's kindness. Everyone was nervously watching. Even the other divine dwelling experts temporarily stopped their attacks and stood on two sides, facing each other. I'm afraid things aren't looking good this time. Even Wan Yanlan, who was used to seeing big storms and big waves, had a serious tone. The combat power of a venerable was far beyond imagination, and the divine dwelling stage was no match for them. How did he break through to the heavenly palace realm? The 100-Flower Palace Master's pretty face was also solemn. In short, the current situation was almost one-sided. A single venerable was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. The people of Saint Origin dynasty held their breaths as they waited. Today's battle would determine the future of the dynasty. But for the heaven prides of the other dynasties, they were just watching a good show. If a venerable takes action, the Sword Sect's Talon and Yi Guqin won't be able to survive. Crown Prince Xinghong shook his head. He didn't even need to send those 5 people. Are you so sure? Since Feng Manlu can become Yi Guqin's master, he must be extraordinary. Princess Feng Shi's eyes were deep. Yi Guqin could be said to be an inexhaustible treasure. He could always exceed people's expectations. Then, how could his master be an ordinary person? Crown Prince Xinghong's eyes flashed gloomily when he heard this. What was this? Love me, love my dog. Or could it be that Princess Fengxi was so fond of Yi Guqin that even her master thought that he was extraordinary? Then let's wait and see. A heaven and earth spirit bridge expert can rely on the unity of man and sword to be comparable to a divine dwelling stage expert, but it's impossible for him to be a match for a venerable, Crown Prince Xinghong said coldly. With his divine dwelling broken, Feng Manlu's cultivation was only comparable to a heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. The difference between them wasn't any less than Yi Guqin's divine soul 9 changes and Gu Zun's heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. It was even bigger. Yi Guqin could defeat Gu Zun because he had countless trump cards. Feng Manlu, on the other hand, didn't reveal anything. Even though he was once the Sword King, it was all in the past. Therefore, no one was optimistic about Feng Manlu's chances. Lord Feng Manlu. All the Sword Sect's Talon disciples were extremely worried. Yi Guqin, Uncle Feng will be fine, right? Yan Wushuang was nervous. Apart from Yan Changge, Feng Manlu was her closest kin. Yan Wushuang couldn't imagine how heartbroken she would be if Feng Manlu died. Don't worry. Senior Feng isn't an ordinary person, Yi Guqin comforted. At this moment, the world fell silent. Only the sound of everyone's breathing could be heard. Xian Wuji and Feng Manlu stood opposite each other. The other divine dwelling stage experts stood on opposite sides. Manlu. Yan Changge sighed. Although he wanted to stop Feng Manlu, he knew that Feng Manlu wouldn't back down. I'll give you a chance. Submit to the Limitless Sword Sect and you may live, Xian Wuji said indifferently. If I hadn't broken through to the divine dwelling stage 10 years ago, so what if I'm a venerable? Feng Manlu smiled. It was a simple sentence, but it contained an unparalleled arrogance. So what if you're a venerable? What a joke. Today, I'll show you the power of a venerable. Xian Wuji didn't say anything else. The yin-yang sword domain pressed down, as if it had turned into a black and white millstone. Feng Manlu smiled, not afraid at all. Sword chi erupted from his body. Using his finger as a sword, endless sword chi swept across the void as if it could destroy everything. The fluctuations made the eyelids of many divine dwelling stage experts twitch. One with the sword. Feng Manlu had comprehended the ultimate enlightenment after 10 years of seclusion. Once he attacked, even divine dwelling stage experts would be wary. Because one with the sword was unparalleled in attack, it was said that it was invincible among those of the same level and could even fight against those of a higher level. This was the fundamental reason why Feng Manlu could rival divine dwelling stage experts. Moreover, Feng Manlu's understanding of one with the sword was much deeper than Ye Guqin's. One with the sword. If I was still at the divine dwelling stage, I would be wary. But now, it's just so. Xian Wuji was still calm. The black and white millstone formed by the yin-yang sword domain crushed the void. All the sword chi that pierced through was destroyed by the black and white millstone. Sigh, it's still not enough. The Sword King can't go against the heavens. Seeing that Xian Wuji had easily resolved Feng Manlu's attack, many cultivators shook their heads. The legend of the Sword King would come to an end today. Feng Manlu, your futile struggle will only make you look more ridiculous. Die. Xian Wuji said indifferently as he swept out his sword. The sword, which contained the power of a venerable, cut through the void and slashed toward Feng Manlu. Time seemed to stop at this moment. The all heavens were dead silent. Xian Wuji's sword light was about to pierce through Feng Manlu. But... clang! Feng Manlu stretched out his hand and pointed at the void with his finger as a sword. With a cracking sound, the oncoming sword light was directly shattered. This. The faces of hundreds of thousands of people froze at this moment. Xian Wuji was also extremely surprised. An extremely powerful force spread out from Feng Manlu's body, and the pressure swept in all directions. I'm no longer the spirit bridge of heaven and earth. Feng Manlu placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently. His body was like a sword that cut through the sky. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. Chapter 725. At this moment, Feng Manlu stood high in the sky with his hands behind his back. His eyes were empty, and he looked like an ordinary handsome middle-aged man. However, the terrifying power that erupted from his body made the hundreds of thousands of people present feel suffocated. Divine dwelling stage. The mouths of some martial experts trembled, and they couldn't speak clearly. No, how can Feng Manlu be of the divine dwelling stage? The yin-yang elders, War Emperor and the others all revealed looks of extreme surprise. Everyone knew that Feng Manlu's divine dwelling had been destroyed. Once the divine dwelling was destroyed, his cultivation path would be cut off. He would forever be stuck at the spirit bridge of heaven and earth, and could no longer continue to cultivate. This is impossible. Even Xian Wuji revealed a look of surprise. Others might be puzzled. But only Xian Wuji knew that he had personally destroyed Feng Manlu's divine dwelling 10 years ago. How could Feng Manlu become a divine dwelling stage expert again? Oh, are you puzzled? Feng Manlu's voice was calm and calm. A breeze blew over, blowing the black hair on his forehead. His plain clothes fluttered in the wind, but Feng Manlu was the focus of attention of the hundreds of thousands of people present. Could it be that he is rebuilding his divine dwelling? Some of the Empire Heaven Pride's eyes were filled with surprise. It was rumored that some extremely talented cultivators would not hesitate to destroy their own divine dwellings and rebuild them in order to reach the pinnacle of cultivation. Of course, Most of them would not be able to rebuild their divine dwelling and would eventually become a cripple. But there were also a very small number of peerless geniuses who were reborn and rebuilt their divine dwellings. And the quality of the divine dwelling after the transformation and reconstruction could almost crush experts of the same level. Of course, almost no one would do such a crazy thing as destroying their own divine dwelling. Feng Manlu did not destroy his own divine dwelling, but it was destroyed by Xian Wuji. But the aura he released at this moment was undoubtedly that of the divine dwelling stage. And his cultivation was at least at the 7th level of the divine dwelling stage. This was the foundation of Feng Manlu's 10 years of closed-door cultivation, and at this moment, he had directly jumped to the 7th level. It really is rebuilding his divine dwelling. Lord Feng Manlu is indeed a genius. All the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association roared frantically. In their hearts, Sword King Feng Manlu had once again shocked the world. Even the geniuses of some transcendent powers wouldn't be able to do it. Yi Guqin's master is truly extraordinary. Princess Phoenix Dawn couldn't help sighing. Her guess was correct. For someone like Yi Guqin, how could his master be ordinary? As for Xinghong Crown Prince, his expression was ugly to the extreme. Not only had he been slapped in the face by Yi Guqin, he had even been slapped in the face by his master. The veins on Crown Prince Xinghong's temples throbbed as he clenched his fists tightly. So what if he sculpts his divine palace? His opponent is an exalted. Crown Prince Xinghong took a deep breath and said. Princess Feng, she said, you're underestimating the strength of a divine dwelling expert. A divine dwelling expert's strength cannot be mentioned in the same breath as before. Feng Manlu's return to the 7th layer of the divine dwelling shocked everyone. Yi Guqin was the only one who was not particularly surprised. He seemed to have expected this. Is it because of the divine dwelling elixir? But the divine dwelling elixir should only play a supporting role. The most important thing is that Senior Feng went into seclusion for 10 years and broke through the limits of his cultivation. With his extraordinary talent, he was able to sculpt his divine dwelling. Yi Guqin thought to himself. In any case, Yi Guqin was looking forward to Feng Manlu's performance after sculpting his divine dwelling. Feng Manlu, I've indeed underestimated you. Xian Wuji let out a long sigh. He was now glad that he had made a move 10 years ago. Otherwise, if Feng Manlu had been able to cultivate smoothly, he would have probably become a heavenly palace exalted by now. Only the weak will walk the crooked path. A true expert will use his own perseverance to step on the path of the great Tao. Xian Wuji, this is the only thing you can do in your life. Feng Manlu's figure stood high in the sky like an unyielding sword that could break the heavens. At this moment, everyone's eyes were gathered on Feng Manlu. Many sword cultivators were filled with admiration. What kind of immortal master and disciple are they? Gongsun Xiaoye and the other girls were infatuated. Whether it was Yi Guqin or Feng Manlu, they were both impressive. Feng Manlu was facing Xian Wuji, who was at the exalted stage, without the slightest fear. Since you don't want to join the limitless sword sect, you can die. Xian Wuji attacked again. The battle strength of the exalted stage erupted, and the yin-yang sword domain was like a black and white millstone that crushed toward Feng Manlu. I've already said that an exalted stage is nothing. Feng Manlu shook his head indifferently. After 10 years, he once again displayed the battle strength of the 7th layer of the divine dwelling stage. Vaguely, a dazzling and flawless divine dwelling appeared in Feng Manlu's dantian, and its aura spread out in all directions. As the saying goes, one can only stand after being broken. If the divine dwelling was destroyed, it could be rebuilt. The quality of the reconstructed divine dwellings would reach a whole new level. It could almost crush the majority of experts of the same level. Coupled with the support of the man and sword, Feng Manlu's strength could almost sweep away all divine dwelling stage experts. Even the War Emperor, who was at the 9th layer of the divine dwelling stage, could not defeat Feng Manlu, who was at the 7th layer of the divine dwelling stage. Wind Sword Dao. Feng Manlu's body was like a gust of wind, and his speed was extremely fast. The two broke out in a fierce battle in the void, and they exchanged hundreds of blows. He can really contend against an exalted stage expert. All the spectators were shocked, and their faces were filled with horror. Feng Manlu relied on his own strength to contend against Xian Wuji, who was at the exalted stage. Although Xian Wuji had just become an exalted stage expert and had not even consolidated his cultivation of the first layer. But it was still far from what a divine dwelling stage expert could contend against. Your strength. Xian Wuji's face darkened. The situation was completely different from what he had expected. His exalted stage battle strength could not crush Feng Manlu. Wind God's single sword, laughing in the sky. A green wind god's sword emerged from Feng Manlu's body. The sword swung out, shaking the 9 heavens and slashing the 9 underworlds. Its power shook the heavens and the earth. Wind mark. Feng Manlu slashed out with his sword, and it cut through the void. The heavens trembled, and the void shattered. The King of Swords descended upon the world once again. Yin-Yang sword. Xian Wuji roared, and the yin-yang sword split into 2 shocking sword rays. Boom! The void shook, and a storm of sword chi swept out around the forbidden Violet Mountain. Everyone was forced to retreat. Even the divine dwelling stage experts were forced to retreat. The shock waves from the battle were too shocking. Rumble. The shock waves from the battle seemed to be the wrath of the heavens. With one move, I will end the 10 years of enmity between us. Feng Manlu stood high in the sky, and he raised his hand. Endless sword rays of true chi gathered and formed a 1,000-foot golden sword lotus. It was the reincarnation sword lotus of the 6th generation sword master, Ren Pingsheng. But it was different from Yiguchen's. Feng Manlu had used the complete 360 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus. Is this the complete reincarnation sword lotus? Yiguchen raised his head and took a deep breath. After obtaining the painting of the reincarnation green lotus on the 9th level of the sword sect pagoda, he naturally would not cultivate it alone. He shared it with Feng Manlu. Given Feng Manlu's strength, he could use the complete reincarnation sword lotus. A 1,000-foot sword lotus with 360 leaves bloomed between heaven and earth, and it was as if it was the only one. It was magnificent. But it was an ultimate killing move. The 1,000-foot sword lotus wrapped around Xian Wuji's body. It's over, Feng Manlu turned around, and he placed his hands behind his back. His black hair danced in the wind, and he looked peerless. Boom! The reincarnation sword lotus rotated, and Xian Wuji's angry roar came from it. No! Spurt! Endless blood spurted out. The lightless sword king, Feng Manlu. He killed a sovereign with ease. Chapter 726. The heavens and earth were in dead silence. Only the falling rain of blood indicated a shocking fact. Xian Wuji had fallen. Amidst the rain of blood, Feng Manlu stood with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and his handsome face was incomparably calm. 10 years of hatred has come to an end. There was no joy or excitement, only a faint sigh. Feng Manlu had been in seclusion in the Sword Sect Pagoda for 10 years and his temperament was as calm as an ancient well. Even after killing Xian Wuji, who was a sovereign, Feng Manlu did not feel anything. Boring. Feng Manlu shook his head. As soon as his words fell, the surrounding few 100,000 people fell into dead silence. Only Feng Manlu would be able to say that killing honorable martial artists was boring. No. No, how is it possible? Sect leader has fallen. The Yin-Yang elders' faces turned pale. As for Qiu Shan, his old face twitched and turned as pale as a dead man's face. Sect leader is a sovereign. How is it possible? Feng Manlu, how are you so strong? Qiu Shan's heart clenched and he was about to go crazy. Oh right, I forgot about you. Feng Manlu's expression was indifferent as he took a step forward. Wind mark, a sword that killed with one strike. Puff. An old head flew out and Qiu Shan's eyes popped out. He died with a grievance. Killing a divine dwelling realm expert with just one move. Retreat. When the war emperor saw this scene, the hair on his back stood up. He knew that his combat strength was unparalleled among the divine dwelling realm experts. However, at this moment, Feng Manlu gave him a feeling of death. Do you think you can escape? Feng Manlu attacked again. Puff. The war emperor retreated and a huge bloody hole appeared in his chest. His heart was crushed. Puff. Emperor Ling's body was split into two and blood spurted out. Puff. The flame emperor's head flew out and blood rained down. In an instant, 3 divine dwelling realm experts had fallen in the hands of Feng Manlu. I didn't want to kill you, but you guys have gone too far. Feng Manlu's expression was indifferent. He did not kill easily and had always been merciful to his enemies. But this time, Xian Wuji, the battle emperor, and the others had gone too far. If he had not rebuilt his divine dwelling and returned to the 7th heavenly layer, Yan Chang'e, Yi Guqin, and the others might have been the ones to die today. Therefore, Feng Manlu showed no mercy. The divine wind sword swept across the void and killed all his enemies. Retreat. The 5 divine dwelling experts of the Heavenly Star Empire retreated without the slightest hesitation. Feng Manlu hesitated for a moment and did not make a move. He wasn't afraid, but he was thinking for the sake of the Sword Sect's Tower Forest. Now was not the time to make an enemy out of a top-tier dynasty. The 3 black-robed men also wanted to retreat. Feng Manlu used his finger as a sword. The divine wind sword streaked across the void like a bolt of lightning. Puchi. The 3 black-robed men exploded into pieces of flesh and bones that filled the sky. In the dark, the Yuan Master's eyelids twitched and his cheeks twitched. Those were the top forces of Saint Origin Dynasty. Yet, they were killed by Feng Manlu. A rain of blood drifted down, and heaven and earth mourned. Feng Manlu stood in the sky with his sword. A sword swept through the dynasty, killing until the world went silent. Everyone was silent. This was the first time they had seen the Sword King Feng Manlu kill so many people. However, Feng Manlu's clothes were white from washing and there was not a trace of blood on them. Who else? Feng Manlu stood alone in the sky with his hands behind his back. The divine wind sword flickered in and out of his body. The surroundings were silent, and heaven and earth were silent. Feng Manlu alone suppressed the entire dynasty. Feng Manlu, sweeping up the yellow sand, dancing with the sword in spring and autumn. His name shakes the world. Many sword cultivators recited the poems that had once praised Feng Manlu with trembling voices. 10 years later, Feng Manlu's sword had once again shaken the world. 1 man and 1 sword had suppressed the entire dynasty. At this point, the dust had finally settled. The Limitless Sword Sect, the 3 imperial palaces, and the divine dwelling experts had all been killed. Feng Manlu did not kill the lord of the bestowed blade monarch palace, but only severely injured him. As for the Yuan master, he appeared at the last moment without any killing intent. Instead, he had a smile on his face. As expected of the blind sword king, Feng Manlu. I'm impressed. Both master and disciple are dragons among men, the Yuan master said with a smile. Feng Manlu's face was indifferent. He naturally knew the identity of the 3 black-robed men. However, Feng Manlu was not interested in the imperial family of the Saint Origin dynasty. If he attacked the Yuan master and the others, the dynasty would inevitably be shaken. Just this once, Feng Manlu said indifferently. The Yuan master's face stiffened. He was a little embarrassed, but he still nodded slightly. Not far away, Prince Yuani, Princess Yuan Shi and the others in the Saint Origin Academy were trembling with anger as they clenched their fists. Especially Prince Yuani, whose face was filled with unwillingness. He had sacrificed so much, and in the end, he followed Prince Xingheng like a dog. In the end, he still failed to kill Yi Guqin. Even his father, the emperor, had to show weakness in front of Feng Manlu. No, I'm unwilling. There's still a chance. Prince Xinghong will not give up. He only sent divine-dwelling experts this time. In addition, the qualifiers of the heavenly battlefield are about to begin. I heard that the Starry Sword Pavilion will send people over. Yi Guqin, you will die in the end. Prince Yuanyi roared in his heart, but on the surface, his face was gloomy. He did not dare to show the slightest resentment. In the entire Saint Origin dynasty, there was probably no one who could deal with Feng Manlu and Yi Guqin. Humph. Prince Xinghong snorted coldly and left. He had to admit that he was not prepared enough and had overlooked Feng Manlu, the variable. Today's events have opened my eyes. Princess Feng, she sighed. Ha, this pair of master and disciple are immortals. Kenpo sighed with a smile. He also breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Yi Guqin would die today. It would be a pity for the Sword Dao. The other dynasty's heavenly prides were also overwhelmed with emotions. Today's events were enough to make them think about it for a long time. Feng Manlu and Yi Guqin, this pair of master and disciple, had shocked the entire dynasty. Yi Guqin was invincible among the heavenly prides of the dynasty. Even the prime sovereign of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge was defeated by him. Feng Manlu's sword swept across the four directions, killing sovereigns with a wave of his hand. This pair of master and disciple had monopolized the number one expert of the dynasty and the number one expert of the younger generation. In the younger generation of the Saint Origin dynasty, Yi Guqin was invincible and stood at the pinnacle. As the curtain fell on the Forbidden City summit, those shocking scenes also spread throughout the entire empire. As for the Limitless Sword sect, the three imperial palaces and other forces, they were like a group of dragons without a leader. There was no need for the Sword sect, Talon, and other sects to take action. A sect that did not have a divine-dwelling expert would eventually fall apart. Heavens, what kind of immortal master and disciple are they? They are so powerful. Yi Guqin and Feng Manlu's deeds had also spread throughout the dynasty. There was no doubt that they had become the most dazzling existence in the entire dynasty. Feng Manlu's current strength was comparable to a sovereign. Yi Guqin's strength was also comparable to the heaven and earth spiritual bridge. These two people were able to break their own limits and challenge those of a higher level. They could even kill experts of a higher level. I'm looking forward to Sword Sect Ye's performance in the qualifiers of the Heavenly Pride's battlefield. Yeah, one man and one sword, he defeated all the Heavenly Prides of the various dynasties and became the strongest. TSK, I'm afraid that there has never been a record of a Heavenly Prides of the lower dynasties winning the championship. Indeed, if Sword Sect Ye can defeat all the Heavenly Prides with one sword, then he will create another record, a record in the South Horizon region. Everyone in the Saint Origin dynasty was discussing enthusiastically. Yi Guqin's strength would probably shock all the other heavenly prides of the other dynasties. While the entire dynasty was in an uproar because of Yi Guqin's deeds. Far away from the Saint Origin dynasty, in the South Horizon region, there was a change in the Starry Sword Pavilion. Chapter 727. This was a mountain range filled with spiritual qi, and it was filled with rich spiritual qi. The mountain range rose and fell like an earth dragon. At first glance, one could tell that it was an auspicious land of treasures. What was even more shocking was that the sky above the mountain range was pitch black, and it was filled with the Milky Way. It was hard to imagine that outside the mountain range, the weather was clear. But inside the mountain range, there was a dazzling Milky Way night, which was shocking. Obviously, a supreme expert had revealed a great divine ability, and he'd intercepted and absorbed the stars from beyond the heavens before refining them into the sky. Only then was he able to create such a strange scene. This was no longer a human's ability, but a miracle. This vast mountain range with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles, which was comparable to a small empire, was the residence of the Starry Sword Pavilion, an overlord force of the South Sky region. Starfall Mountain Range. At this moment, in front of a majestic palace in the Starfall mountain range, a woman in a starry cloud robe calmly stepped into the palace. Her skin was crystal clear, and her eyes were bright, but there was a noble and cold aura that prevented strangers from getting close. She was like a star in the sky, which could be seen but not touched. If Yi Guqin was here, he would definitely recognize her. This woman was the prided daughter of the Starry Sword Pavilion, Song Yuyao, who had appeared with Gu Xiaoyang through the Stargate in the Tianhuang Plains. Song Yuyao was from the Starry Sword Pavilion, and one of the 7 Great Bears, the Alcade Star. Back then, she and Gu Xiaoyang had arrived at the Tianhuang Plains together like gods, overlooking Yi Guqin. Her cultivation was now at the peak of the Spirit Bridge stage, and she was one step away from the Divine Dwelling stage. Elder Xinggu, why are you looking for me? Song Yuyao stepped into the palace and found that there was another person there. It was a young man in a starry robe, and there was a strange starry brilliance in his eyes. Zhou Heng, you're here too. Song Yuyao's eyes were a little surprised. The young man in a starry robe named Zhou Heng smiled. He was also one of the 7 Great Bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Alcade Star, Zhou Heng. As a great 7 heavens pride, he had a special ability, the magnetic star divine light. It was the strange light hidden in his eyes. When released, it was extremely powerful. It could even transform into a star magnetic field that could lock down the entire area. I was also called here by Elder Xinggu. What's the matter? Zhou Heng looked at Song Yuyao, a faint admiration hidden in his eyes. But he knew that Song Yuyao had long been Gu Xiaoyang's woman, so he could only look. Humph. Gu Xiaoyang, when he thought of Gu Xiaoyang, Zhou Heng felt powerless. She has the innate ability, the indestructible divine embryo. She can fuse with Xiaoyang's innate sword embryo to form the innate indestructible sword embryo. This is very important to Xiaoyang. Is that so? Song Yuyao's heart turned sour when she heard this. Zhou Heng's heart was burning with jealousy. Damn it! Not only did he win senior sister Song Yuyao's favor, he even dared to touch fairy Tsang. Zhou Heng was extremely jealous. Yi Tsang of the Misty Sword Pavilion was as beautiful as a celestial fairy. Her beauty was widely known in the South Horizon region. Coupled with her status as a grade 8 prodigy, she was the dream lover of countless male cultivators. However, Yi Tsang was as cold as a celestial fairy. She was an icy beauty. Almost no one of the opposite sex could get close to her. Only Gu Xiaoyang was able to fuse with the indestructible divine embryo because of his innate sword embryo. Because of this, he had the chance to get close to Yi Tsang and even dual cultivate with her. How could Zhou Heng not be jealous? Song Yuyao, Zhou Heng, only the 2 of you will go this time. Both of you have reached the peak of the Spirit Bridge of Heaven and Earth and are just a little bit away from breaking through to the Divine Dwelling stage. This will be a chance for you to break through while traveling. In addition, I will also send 2 sovereigns to accompany you, just in case, said Elder Xinggu. Yes. Song Yuyao and Zhou Heng nodded. The 2 left the hall. Senior sister Song, let's take care of each other along the way, said Zhou Heng with a smile. Yes. Song Yuyao nodded with a cold expression. However, she was thinking about something else. The Saint Origin Dynasty. Junior brother Xiaoyang obtained the innate sword embryo there. The original owner of the innate sword embryo, Yi something, must be dead by now. Song Yuyao sneered. He had been attacked by Gu Xiaoyang's star eyes and was even implanted with the star soul spirit devouring worm. Song Yuyao didn't believe that Yi Guqin could survive. Yi Guqin was just an insignificant ant. Song Yuyao couldn't even remember his name. However, in her eyes, there was no need to remember the name of an ant. Chapter 728. Just as Song Yuyao and the others from Starry Universe Sword Pavilion were preparing to leave for Saint Origin Dynasty. In Saint Origin Dynasty, all kinds of rumors about the battle at the Forbidden City Summit were still boiling and would not die down in a short period of time. Even in the imperial capital, in the restaurants and tea-houses of various cities, there were storytellers who talked about the amazing deeds of Yiguchen, Feng Manlu, and the others day and night. It could be said that Yiguchen and Feng Manlu had become the legends of Saint Origin dynasty. They were the common goal of all sword cultivators in the dynasty. However, Yiguchen, who was the center of attention, had already returned to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. His injuries from this battle were truly too severe. Among his peers, Gu Zun could be said to be the one who had caused the most injuries to him, apart from Gu Xiaoyang. Yiguchen did not know what happened to Gu Zun in the end. Did he go crazy and wander the world alone, or was he brought back to the battle god Saber Sect by Dao Wumeng? But no matter what, Yiguchen did not care. Even if Gu Zun had obtained the 7 kills Saber Saint's inheritance, his cultivation speed would increase by leaps and bounds. Yiguchen was not someone to be trifled with. His speed of improvement would only be faster. Yiguchen would not look back, he would only press forward. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Yiguchen had been recuperating for half a month. At this moment, in the pavilion where Yiguchen was staying on number 5 peak. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the pavilion, adjusting his breath. Behind him, Feng Manlu placed his hands on Yiguchen's back, using pure true energy to heal the injuries in his body. After a while, Yiguchen spat out a mouthful of turbid blood and his face regained its color. In the past half a month, Yiguchen had consumed countless quasi-sage pills and quasi-sage medicines. The ancient god's blood was also refining Yiguchen's body every day. Furthermore, Wind's sweeping tower would come to Yiguchen regularly every day to help him recover from his injuries. "Thank you, Senior Feng. My injuries are probably fine now," Yiguchen said in a soothing voice. Even though he hadn't fully recovered yet, he was already mostly healed. His daily cultivation wouldn't be a problem. "You helped me obtain victory in the Battle of the Sword and Saber and suffered such a heavy injury. These small matters are not worth mentioning." Feng Manlu smiled gently. He was like a god of death when dealing with enemies like Xian Wuji. He killed until heaven and earth went silent. However, at that moment, he had returned to his usual self. He had turned into a warm and ordinary man. "Senior Feng, your true qi seems to be extremely pure," Yiguchen inquired. The reason why his injuries had healed so quickly was because of his strong physique, as well as the help of the ancient god's blood and quasi-saint medicine. But on the other hand, Feng Manlu's Jinqi was also a factor. "Heh. Although this Feng is your master in name, I don't seem to have taught you anything about cultivation. Today, I will tell you some things about the spiritual palace." Spiritual palace experts, as the name suggests, form the spiritual palace in the Dantian. Now that your cultivation has reached the Grand Xian martial realm, the spiritual qi in your sea of qi is extremely dense. When you break through the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth, your sea of qi will produce liquid true qi. When you break through to the spiritual palace realm, the liquid true qi will condense and form the spiritual palace. Generally speaking, the strength of a spiritual palace expert is measured from the first heaven to the 9th heaven. But in addition, the quality of the spiritual palace is closely related to the strength of one's true qi. The reason why I was able to kill Xian Wuji, who had just become a venerable, is because the spiritual palace in my body has become a flawless spiritual palace. Flawless spiritual palace? Yiguchen was puzzled. The quality of the spiritual palace is divided into 3 grades: flawed, flawless, and leakless. After my spiritual palace was formed, it went from flawed to flawless. Naturally, my strength soared, Feng Manlu said. "I see." Yiguchen was enlightened. Feng Manlu originally had a flawed spiritual palace, but it was broken by Xian Wuji. After it was broken and formed, it became a flawless spiritual palace, and his strength soared. However, it is extremely difficult to advance the quality of the spiritual palace. I was lucky to be able to form a flawless spiritual palace. If it is broken again, it will be more than 100 times more difficult to form a leakless spiritual palace, Feng Manlu said. Yi Guqin nodded inwardly. It was likely that the vast majority of divine dwelling experts had a flawed divine dwelling. Only a small number of talented individuals were able to break through and establish a flawless divine dwelling. As for a leakless spiritual palace, it was almost impossible. Those who were not dragons among men, had great luck, great talent, and great perseverance could not succeed. Are there only 3 grades of spiritual palace? Yi Guqin was curious. Feng Manlu pondered for a moment, then said, it is said that there is a 4th grade above the 3 grades of spiritual palace, which is the world. Not only are the spiritual dwellings of that level flawless, but they also contain spirituality. It's as though they can transform into a small world or even a spiritual dwelling to suppress and imprison enemies. Of course, that's just a rumor. Spiritual dwellings of this level are almost extinct in this era. Feng Manlu smiled faintly. The speaker did not mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Yi Guqin was secretly shocked. Even his breathing was about to stop. After breaking through the 3rd tribulation, the soul tribulation in the sea of consciousness, Yi Guqin knew about the 4th tribulation. It was the 4 great tribulations of earth, water, fire, and wind that targeted the divine dwelling stage. Yi Guqin once again recalled that in some myths, earth, water, fire, and wind were the 4 great elements that made up the world. Could it be? Yi Guqin's heart suddenly jumped. If he passed the 4 great tribulations of earth, water, fire, and wind, could the quality of his spiritual palace be transformed into the legendary highest grade, which was a small world? It was very possible. Even with Yi Guqin's temperament, his chest rose and fell as he took a deep breath. The spiritual palace that was comparable to a small world was almost extinct in this era. It just so happens that the 4 great tribulations correspond to flawless, leakless, and world. Every time I pass a small tribulation, the quality of my spiritual palace should rise by a level. Yi Guqin thought to himself. Feng Manlu's strength had increased by so much just by breaking through to the flawless spiritual palace. Yi Guqin had rebuilt his spiritual palace 4 times and formed a spiritual palace world. How powerful would that be? He would most likely be invincible among his peers. Of course, although the benefits were great, the 4 great tribulations were also extremely dangerous. If he was not careful, his spiritual palace would shatter, and he might never be able to reform it again. Risk and opportunity coexisted. If I shrink back in fear, I won't be Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin smiled. But this would have to wait until he reached the divine dwelling stage. He was still a distance away from the divine dwelling stage and needed to break through the heaven and earth spirit bridge. If I have the innate sword embryo and perfect my dantian, it should be much easier to break through the heaven and earth spirit bridge. Yi Guqin sighed inwardly. The innate sword embryo was born in his body, but it was forcibly taken away by Gu Xiaoyang. If he could take back the innate sword embryo, Yi Guqin's cultivation would be much easier. I wonder if the Starry Sword Pavilion will send people to the Heaven's Pride Battlefield qualifiers, and if Gu Xiaoyang will come. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. If he faced Gu Xiaoyang again, he would not be as powerless as before. Chapter 729. A few days later, the preliminaries of the Sky Pride battlefield were about to begin. Yi Guqin had been recuperating in seclusion in the Sword Sect forest and consolidating his gains. The aftermath of the battle at the Forbidden Purple Summit had yet to dissipate. The story of the battle between the sword and the saber was still being spread all over the dynasty. However, amidst all this excitement, something strange had happened in the Tianhuang Plain. As the most famous place of opportunity in the Saint Origin dynasty, many experts had died in the Tianhuang Plain, leaving behind many cave residences. The last test of the 10 Mansions elite gathering was to find the cave residences of experts in the Tianhuang Plain. No one knew why so many experts had died in this place. Not many people knew about the immemorial sword token. However, this did not stop the warriors from searching for treasures here. Recently, the death qi in the bottomless demonic abyss had spread all over the Tianhuang Plain. Outside the Tianhuang Plain, two life and death realm experts looked worried. Damn it, the death qi has spread all over the Tianhuang Plain. We can't go in to search for treasures, one of them said bitterly. I really don't know what happened, another person said. Meanwhile, the whole Tianhuang Valley began to shake vigorously. Rumble. It was as if an ancient giant had awakened and was stomping on the ground. The vast Tianhuang Plain shook like a drum. Oh my God, is the sky going to collapse? The two experts were shocked. At this moment, they saw something they would never forget. Endless black death qi surged out from the bottomless demonic abyss. Then, a pitch-black demonic city broke out of the ground and tore the ground apart. It floated in the endless death qi. The deathly aura that could devour everything spread in all directions. What is that? The two experts were dumbstruck, as if they had been petrified. Whoosh! 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 One after another, figures flew out from the ancient demon city. These figures had gray skin and no signs of life, but they could still move. They were demonic corpse puppets that had been devoured by the death qi. Ye Guqin had encountered such things when he was forced into the bottomless demonic abyss by Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun. The two of them were scared out of their wits. Those demonic corpse puppets only moved within the range of the aura of death. However, the aura of death had already spread past the area where the two of them were. Retreat! The two figures abruptly retreated, but the demonic corpse puppets that filled the sky had discovered their tracks. Several fiend corpse puppets charged at the two of them. In just a single exchange, he had blown apart the bodies of two life and death chamber experts. What was even more inconceivable was that after the body exploded, the vital energy was directly absorbed by the deathly aura. Then, it was sucked back into the pitch-black eternal demon city. In the ancient devil city, roars and howls could be vaguely heard. Ren Pingsheng, you won't be able to trap me, ha ha ha. The changes in the heavenly desolate plains had not only shaken the entire Saint Origin dynasty, but also some people in some secret places in the South Sky region had sensed it. South Horizon region, in a mysterious place, in a small world within a spatial crack. Inside, it was like a paradise. Valleys and ravines crisscrossed and filled with immortal qi, making it seem otherworldly. In the South Sky region, it was definitely difficult to find such an immortal realm. At this moment, on the peak of a mountain, where spiritual energy gathered, a woman in a snow-white silk dress was sitting cross-legged on it. Her face was peerless, and her hair was as black as the clouds. Her face was as bright as the moon. Her body was slender, her neck was slender, her breasts were plump, and her waist was slender. She was truly a peerless woman with an indescribable appearance. Her red lips parted slightly as she exhaled a breath and opened her beautiful eyes slightly. Her beautiful eyes were filled with indifference. It was difficult to feel the aura of a human from her body. She was like a fairy who had cut off all human emotions. Qinxue, at this moment, an illusionary figure of an immortal appeared in the void. Master! This peerless woman was Situ Hongxue, who had changed her name to Hongqin Shui. At this moment, Situ Hongxue stood up and responded indifferently. This immortal shadow was the master of the Immortal Valley, a transcendent existence that was above the entire South Sky region. How is your cultivation of the Tao of Heartless? In the void, the master of the Immortal Valley asked. His voice was as cold as spring water. Master, I have cultivated it to about 80%, Situ Hongxue replied. Only 80%? Logically speaking, with your 7 extinction demon heart, you should be able to fully comprehend the Tao of Heartless. Or do you still have something in your heart? The master of the Immortal Valley asked indifferently. No, that's not the case, Situ Hongxue lowered her eyelashes and said in a weak voice. Ah, Grandma Withered Flower has already told me about your hometown, the Saint Origin dynasty. That's good too. This time, I have sensed that there seems to be a change in the Saint Origin dynasty. you can follow Grandma Withered Flower to check it out. At the same time, you can cut off all love and hatred and focus on cultivating the Tao of Heartless in the future. After the master of the Immortal Valley finished speaking, his figure disappeared into the void. Situ Hong bit her red lips with her snow-white teeth. She flew down the mountain peak and saw a hunchbacked old woman in hemp clothes waiting for her. It was Grandma Withered Flower who had brought her back to the Immortal Valley. Grandma Withered Flower was only a Divine Palace realm expert before. However, after bringing Situ Hongxue back, the master of the Immortal Valley rewarded her and allowed her to break through to the Heavenly Palace realm. Her lifespan was also extended by a lot. You told Master about everything that happened in the Saint Origin dynasty? Situ Hongshue's face turned cold. Ha, I was thinking for you. You should cultivate the Tao of Heartless as soon as possible so that the Master of the Valley will be happy, Grandma Withered Flower said with a smile. I will naturally take revenge for my own blood feud, Situ Hongxue said coldly. Oh, then can you kill that kid called Yi Guchen with your own hands? Grandma Withered Flower said with a smile. Situ Hongshue's body shook. How long had it been since she had heard that name? It seemed to have been buried in her heart for a long time. However, when it was mentioned again, the torn wound was still bloody and painful. Situ Hongshue's long-lasting peace was broken. She was usually calm and aloof. However, at this moment, her face changed slightly and her emotions fluctuated. Grandma Withered Flower looked deeply at Situ Hongxue. She was the one who had brought Situ Hongxue to the Immortal Valley. If Situ Hongxue fully comprehended the Tao of Heartless, Grandma Withered Flower would also be greatly rewarded. Therefore, Situ Hongxue had to cultivate the Tao of Heartless. Situ Hongshue's emotions fluctuated, but she eventually calmed down. Complicated feelings, heartache, hatred, love, and all kinds of emotions were mixed together. Her 7 despair demon heart began to beat. All kinds of emotions eventually turned into coldness. Chinxue understands. Situ Hongshue's face was cold and emotionless. Ha, I'm looking forward to the moment when you kill Yi Guchen with your own hands and comprehend the Tao of Heartless, Grandma Withered Flower muttered with a strange smile. Chapter 730. A million miles away from the Saint Origin dynasty. In the void, a golden dragon boat traversed the void. Along the way, all the surrounding forces avoided them when they saw them. Their eyes were filled with extreme reverence. In the entire Nantian region, there was only one person who would use this magnificent golden dragon boat. It was the heavenly god Sword Sect's heavenly dragon. At this moment, a golden-haired, silver-eyed man in a loose white robe was sitting cross-legged in the dragon boat. His aura was restrained and his temperament was like an immortal, untainted by the mortal world. He was like the descendant of a god, perfect and flawless. He was the heavenly god Sword Sect's crown prince, heavenly god dragon, Di Haotian. After old Xiu's death, Di Haotian came out of seclusion and headed to the Saint Origin dynasty. At this moment, Di Haotian, who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. His silver eyes were filled with mysterious runes and looked very deep. Di Haotian let out a faint sound of surprise. 3 figures appeared before him, who were none other than Martial Highnesses Spring, Summer, and Winter. Master, what's the matter? Reverend Winter and Concubine Ling asked. Interesting. Just now, the Heavenly Emperor's sword in between my eyebrows trembled slightly, as if it was afraid of something, Di Haotian said faintly. How is that possible? The 3 reverends were surprised. The Heavenly Emperor's sword in between Di Haotian's eyebrows was a primordial famed sword, 1/3 of the 3 Emperor's sacred swords. It was extremely powerful and not ordinary weapons could compare to it. But now, it was releasing an aura of fear. To be able to make my Heavenly Emperor's sword afraid, could it be? Di Haotian pondered and the corner of his mouth slowly curled up into a smile. Interesting. Looks like I can not only find Su Jianshi and the human sovereign sword in that small dynasty, but also some unexpected gains. Di Haotian's silver eyes flashed. In another direction of the Saint Origin dynasty, a few 100,000 miles away, there was also a flying boat flying across the sky. On the flying boat, there was a young man and a young woman with two reverends following behind them. The young woman was wearing a purple gold robe. She was beautiful and had a coquettish smile. If Yi Guqin were here, he would definitely recognize that the young woman was Dongfang Ziyun from the Dongfang family who had forced him to go to the bottomless demon abyss. At that time, Dongfang Ziyun had cruelly abandoned Dongfang Hong and escaped alone. And now, she had returned to the Saint Origin dynasty. Are you sure it's the Baiming family? Beside her stood a man in red. His aura was intimidating, and his genuine qi was boiling around him, emitting a blazing aura. He was Dongfang Shuri, the strongest prodigy of the Dongfang family. Of course. The Blood Hell Sword, the Heavenly Demon General Armor, and the God-Slaying Sword Art. How could I be wrong? Big Brother Shuri, you must avenge Big Brother Dongfang Hong. Dongfang Ziyun was on the verge of tears. In the depths of her beautiful eyes, there was a trace of pride. Dongfang Hong had died indirectly at her hands, but as long as she pushed the blame to Yi Guqin, not only would Dongfang Ziyun be fine, she would even receive a reward. Don't worry. The Baiming family and my Dongfang family are old enemies. I won't let anyone go, Dongfang Shuri said coldly. Moreover, he had brought along two venerable ones from his clan, which could almost guarantee that nothing would go wrong. Humph. Although I don't know your name, as long as you're still in the Saint Origin dynasty, everything will be investigated. You're dead. Just be my scapegoat, Dongfang Ziyun said proudly. In her eyes, Yi Guqin was just her scapegoat, destined to be killed by Dongfang Shuri. The unusual movement in the bottomless demon abyss and the appearance of the eternal demon city had caused a stir in the dynasty. Coupled with the upcoming preliminaries of the Sky Pride battlefield, the atmosphere in the dynasty was unprecedentedly intense. Outside the Saint Origin dynasty, there were also many forces from other dynasties that came to watch the preliminaries. It was rumored that there would be overlord forces that would show up, which was rare in the past preliminaries. After all, the preliminaries were like sand being washed away by waves. It would not attract the attention of the overlord forces. Many people guessed that it might be related to the eternal demon city in the infinite flatland. Various forces gathered towards the Saint Origin dynasty with different thoughts and objectives. One could imagine that there would be a huge change in the Saint Origin dynasty. It might shake the entire South Horizon region. On the other hand, the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was as peaceful as ever. After the battle in the Forbidden City, the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest's reputation had reached its peak, almost becoming the #1 force in the Saint Origin dynasty. Yi Guqin had been in seclusion on the #5 peak. His injuries had almost recovered, and he was mainly adjusting his body's condition to prepare for the preliminaries of the Sky Pride battlefield. At the same time, he was also consolidating his gains from the battle in the Forbidden City. The 9 Swords of Dugu requires one to break through the grand threshold and comprehend the unity of man and sword. Yi Guqin muttered. The 9 Swords of Dugu was the highest sword technique that he had created in his previous life. It gathered the essence of all sword techniques in the world and was divided into 9 forms. Each form had a different direction and function. For example, the sword-breaking form could break all techniques with a single strike. It could break most of the techniques. Although Gu Zun's last strike was powerful, it was still broken by the sword-breaking form. In addition, there were also the Heart Sword form, Heavenly Sword form, and so on. Each of them had their own strengths and could not be mastered in a short period of time. However, Yi Guqin believed that if the 9 Swords of Dugu were to be mastered, the power of the 9 Swords of Dugu would surpass the Emperor-level sword technique and reach a whole new level. If Dugu Zun had enough strength, even Yi Guqin could not imagine how powerful the 9 Swords of Man and sword-breaking form would be. In addition, Yi Guqin had also begun to comprehend the unity of man and sword, but it was not very deep. He was not like Feng Manlu, who had been in seclusion for 10 years. His understanding of the unity of man and sword had almost reached the peak, and there was even a faint possibility that he could reach a higher level. Of course, Yiguchin was also confident that it would not take long for his understanding of the unity of man and sword to catch up with Feng Manlu. What I need to do next is to participate in the preliminaries. However, I heard that the bottomless demon abyss has changed and the eternal demon city has appeared. I'm afraid there will be a great storm coming. Yiguchin felt a sense of crisis in his heart. Demon swords across the sky and the celestial emperor covers up the dust. Could there really be an ancient famed sword? Yiguchin thought to himself. Although he had already decided to forge his own famed sword. As a sword cultivator, if there was a chance to obtain an ancient famed sword, he would not give it up. Moreover, Yiguchin still had 2 immemorial sword tokens. Whether or not an ancient famed sword will appear, the storm that will follow will be extremely shocking. I need to borrow all the power I can, Yiguchin thought. He suddenly remembered that he had not tried to awaken the primordial spirit of Su Jianchu's father, Su Qingyu, when he had broken through the primordial spirit of the primordial spirit. Next, let's see if the primordial spirit of the primordial spirit can awaken Uncle Su. Yiguchin's eyes flickered. As a former saint, even if he was only left with his primordial spirit, if he could awaken, he would not be someone ordinary experts could offend. Chapter 731. Yiguchin didn't hesitate and called for Su Jianchu. Have you completely recovered from your injuries? Su Jianchu entered Yiguchin's room. Yiguchin had been in seclusion all this time. Although Su Jianchu was worried about him, she didn't come to disturb him. Now that Yiguchin called her over, she immediately asked about Yiguchin's injuries out of concern. Don't worry, it's nothing serious. Yiguchin smiled faintly. He felt warmth in his heart. As the sword demon, he didn't have any emotions in his previous life. He only focused on the sword Dao. However, Su Jianchu was like a bright beam of light that shone into his heart. Yiguchin still didn't plan on thinking about relationships. However, Su Jianchu had clearly become a special existence in his heart. It's good that you're fine. Don't force yourself to show off in the future, okay? Su Jianchu pouted and looked at Yiguchin with a hint of heartache. Only the heavens knew how much pain she felt when Yiguchin fought Guzun at the top of the Forbidden City. If she could do it all over again, she definitely wouldn't ask Yiguchin to sweep the world for her. Alright, I called you over because I have something to tell you, Yiguchin said solemnly. What is it? Su Jianchu perked up her ears. Yiguchin exhaled deeply. I can try to see if I can nurture Uncle Su's soul and awaken it. What? Su Jianchu was stunned. Her beautiful face seemed to have frozen. Awaken Su Qingyu's soul. Su Jianchu's mind seemed to have exploded. She hurried forward and grabbed Yiguchin's arm tightly. Her beautiful face was almost in front of Yiguchin's eyes. Silly boy, what did you say? You're not lying to me, right? Su Jianchu was so excited that her cheeks flushed. Only the heavens knew how happy she was. We can try, but we might not succeed, Yiguchin said. Su Jianchu's eyes turned red as she bit her lips and said, It's enough, it's enough. As long as there's a trace of hope, this young girl had endured far too much. The destruction of Lotus Village, the death of the Dragon Abyss Village Chief and Uncle Ghost Axe, who had treated her like family. Even her brother, Su Moyan, had left alone to gain experience. Other than Yiguchin, Su Jianchu had lost everyone she could rely on. But Su Jianchu was only a 17-year-old girl. Looking at the girl in front of him, Yiguchin inwardly sighed. Don't worry, I'll try my best, Yiguchin comforted. Next, Su Jianchu took out the soul-accumulating coffin from her origin ring. Inside the soul-storing coffin lay an extremely illusory primordial spirit. He was dressed in green and had a handsome face. His facial features were like jade, but he had a faint sense of majesty. This was Su Jianchu's father, the genius saint of the Su clan, one of the 5 overlord clans, Su Qingyu. Yiguchin opened the soul-storing coffin. Although Su Qingyu's primordial spirit had a suppressive aura, it was extremely weak and almost transparent. Yi Guqin's expression was solemn as he closed his eyes. His sea of consciousness began to spin as extremely dense chaotic soul power spread out and poured into Su Qingyu's primordial spirit. In an instant, Yi Guqin felt as if his soul power had fallen into a bottomless pit. It was as if he was facing an empty universe. This is the primordial spirit of a saint. Yi Guqin was extremely shocked. His sea of consciousness was already extremely powerful, far surpassing an ordinary sea of consciousness. If an ordinary person's sea of consciousness was like a river, in that case, Yi Guqin's chaotic sea of consciousness would be a boundless ocean. But now, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was as vast as a universe. This is a saint. Even if it's just a primordial spirit, it's still amazing. Yi Guqin sighed inwardly. He finally had a clear understanding of a saint. Originally, Yi Guqin still had some confidence that he could wake Su Qingyu up. But now, he wasn't so sure. Yi Guqin's chaotic soul power was much purer and denser than ordinary soul power. But Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was too vast. Pouring in chaotic soul power was like pouring a cup of water into a burning cart of firewood. But Yi Guqin didn't give up and continued to release his soul power. This situation lasted for a full day and night. Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was like a bottomless pit as it absorbed all of Yi Guqin's primordial spirit. But there was no reaction at all. Yi Guqin's face was pale and his lips were as white as paper. Even with the density of his sea of consciousness, it was showing signs of drying up. This was unbelievable. Enough, silly boy. There's no need. Seeing Yi Guqin so haggard, Su Jianshi was slightly disappointed, but more than that, she felt heartache. Yi Guqin was putting in so much effort just to give her father a glimmer of hope. She looked at Yi Guqin with a gentle gaze. Actually, Su Jianshi didn't have much hope in her heart. How could a saint's primordial spirit be so easily awakened? Finally, after a few hours, Yi Guqin's body swayed and fell backward. But in the end, he fell into a warm embrace. Su Jianshi hugged Yi Guqin's exhausted body and gently caressed Yi Guqin's face. It's enough. It's fine. We can still think of a way to help father. Yi Guqin's eyes dimmed. He felt exhausted and powerless and could only lie in Su Jianshi's embrace. Yi Guqin smelled the girl's natural fragrance, but he wasn't in the mood. My chaotic soul power should be useful, but it's too little for a saint's primordial spirit. If I continue pouring it in every day, there might be a chance. Yi Guqin thought to himself. However, Yi Guqin and Su Jianshi didn't notice something. The fingertip of Su Qingyu's primordial spirit, which was lying in the soul-accumulating coffin, trembled slightly. For the next period of time, Yi Guqin repeated the same task. He nurtured Su Qingyu's primordial spirit and recovered the soul power in his sea of consciousness before continuing. However, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit remained silent during this period of time as if there were no changes. Even Su Jianshi had completely given up. She only thought of using other methods to save Su Qingyu. Yi Guqin was still persevering. With the passage of time, the thrilling preliminaries of the Heavenly Talents battlefield was finally about to begin. Although the preliminaries of the Forbidden Violet Summit were only a gathering of prodigies from a dozen dynasties, it was still shocking enough. Only the prodigies who stood out in the preliminaries could truly participate in the prodigy battlefield with the prodigies of the 100 dynasties. The prodigy battlefield was the fastest way to become famous in the South Horizon region. For example, Gu Xiaoyang, one of the 10 great princes, rose to prominence in the prodigy battlefield. He stood out from the 7 great bears and became famous everywhere. The preliminaries are about to begin. Yi Guqin sat cross-legged in the room. During this period of time, he had been pouring chaotic soul power into Su Qingyu's primordial spirit. To Yi Guqin's surprise, his chaotic sea of consciousness seemed to have become more vigorous and his soul power had become more vigorous after repeated exhaustion and replenishment. Is this a pleasant surprise? Yi Guqin laughed. he didn't expect that nurturing Su Qingyu's primordial spirit would make his sea of consciousness more condensed. Yi Guqian estimated that his sea of consciousness was more than 30% more vigorous than before. However, he put away the soul-accumulating coffin. Because the preliminaries of the prodigy battlefield were about to begin. Let me have a go, prodigies of the various dynasties. Yi Guqian looked valiant and disdainful. He was also very curious about how powerful the prodigies of the other dynasties were. Chapter 732. On this day, the entire Saint Origin dynasty was once again bustling with activity. The prodigy battlefield qualifiers were about to begin before the aftermath of the Forbidden Violet Summit had even dissipated. Although the changes in the Tianhuang Plains had attracted the attention of some people, most people were still focused on the qualifiers. This was a competition between the prodigies of more than 10 dynasties. There was no lack of top-tier dynasties that had pseudo-sacred experts. And the prodigies that walked out of these top-tier dynasties were obviously not ordinary. In the past, apart from the prodigies of the overlord factions, the other prodigies were the most outstanding. The most dazzling ones were the prodigies of the top-tier dynasties. The prodigies of the high-tier dynasties were second. As for the prodigies of the mid-tier and low-tier dynasties, they were basically cannon fodder. After all, there was a huge difference between a low-tier dynasty and a top-tier dynasty in all aspects, so there was naturally a difference in the prodigies they cultivated. But this time, in the Forbidden Violet Mountain qualifiers, the people of the Saint Origin dynasty were slightly excited. Because their dynasty had produced an extremely talented sword cultivator. The sword sect, Yi Guqian. Do you guys think that sword sect Yi will sweep through the various dynasties in this qualifier? I think it's possible. After all, sword sect Yi's strength isn't any weaker than the prodigies of the top-tier dynasties. We can't be so sure. Which prodigy of the top-tier dynasties is mediocre? They all have their own trump cards. It won't be that easy for sword sect Yi to subdue those prodigies. On the day of the qualifiers, the people of the various dynasties discussed as they rushed to the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Although Yi Guqian's strength had made them excited, the prodigies of the top-tier dynasties were all outstanding. However, the geniuses of the top dynasties were all extraordinary. For example, Princess Phoenix Dawn had her own innate divine ability. That Xinghong Crown Prince also cultivated the secret arts of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. But it was also because of this that the qualifiers were even more exciting. Sword Sect Tower Forest. Yi Guqian and the others were also ready to go. Feng Manlu and Yan Changge followed. Yan Beilin, Yan Xiaotang, and Yan Feiling also set off together. After all, the Swallow Cloud dynasty was also participating in the qualifiers. Yi Guqian also brought the Divine Condor, Little Black, Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, Little Fatty, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others. Not everyone was like Yi Guqian, who needed to win. For example, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the other disciples were only there to temper themselves. Yi Guqian, this qualifier is your only chance to stand out. You have to make good use of it, Feng Manlu said. He knew that Yi Guqian's stage would be the wider South Horizon region, an even bigger world. Staying in the Saint Origin dynasty would not benefit him at all. Junior understands. Yi Guqian nodded slightly. Let's go then, Yan Changge said. In fact, after the preliminaries, Yan Changge also had the intention to lead the people of Sword Sect Pagoda Forest away from Saint Origin dynasty and return to Swallow Cloud dynasty. Over there, Sword Sect Pagoda Forest would be able to achieve the greatest development. This qualifier would be a chance for these disciples to gain experience and knowledge. At the same time, the 9 Profound Sect, Consonance Palace, and Saint Origin Academy also set off. Their goal was almost the same as Yan Changge's, to bring their disciples to gain experience and knowledge. However, the Blades Sealing Monarch Palace did not send anyone. Their strongest prodigy, Prime Sovereign, was not present. The remaining Prime Sovereigns were also powerless. just as the people of Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were heading towards the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Many people from the various dynasties also brought their prodigies to the Forbidden Violet Mountain. This was not like the previous time, when only a few prodigies from the various dynasties showed up. Almost all the prodigies from over 10 dynasties would be there. There would also be people from the various dynasties who would be there to watch the ceremony. After all, the qualifiers were related to the true prodigy battlefield. The various dynasties were also very attentive. Someone had been repairing the Forbidden Violet Mountain's terrain and arena these days. Although most of it had been repaired, there were still many traces that showed how intense the battle had been. The most eye-catching thing was the 100-feet-deep ravine at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. It was caused by the final clash between Yiguchin and Prime Sovereign. It was impossible to repair it in a short time. It was also the witness of Yiguchin and Prime Sovereign's sword duel of saber. Today, the Forbidden Violet Mountain, which had just quieted down, was once again filled with people. Over 500,000 people gathered around the Forbidden Violet Mountain. The scene was even grander than the one at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. After all, the sword duel of saber was a matter of the Saint Origin dynasty. Most of the spectators were from the various dynasties. However, the qualifiers were different. Over 500,000 people came from over 10 different dynasties. The scene was very lively. The people from the Vermilion Bird dynasty are here. Are those the disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace? A large group of people gathered, and the leader was a venerable one. Among them was Kei Ling, who had once sparred with Yiguchin. At this moment, beside Kei Ling, a few young girls who were similarly dressed in red started chattering away. Kei Ling, are you bragging? How can a battle between two low-tier dynasty prodigies be so thrilling? Some of the girls questioned. There weren't many dynasty prodigies who came to watch the battle at the Forbidden City Summit. Without witnessing it with their own eyes, these prodigies couldn't believe that two low-tier dynasty prodigies were comparable to a top-tier dynasty's prodigy. Why would I lie to you? I saw it with my own eyes. Kei Ling, defended herself. Kei Ling, aren't you exaggerating a little too much? A woman in a red palace dress said. Her eyes were burning with a faint flame. She was the strongest prodigy of the Vermilion Bird Palace. Her name was Vermilion Bird Jade. Senior sister, I'm not lying. Kei Ling, was speechless. No one believed her even if she told the truth. Alright, I'd like to see how capable that low-tier dynasty prodigy is when the qualifiers begin. Vermilion Bird Jade pouted. Her eyes were full of doubt. Although she was proud, she was more prejudiced against low-tier dynasties. Not only her, but the other prodigies also couldn't believe it when they heard about the battle on the Forbidden Violet Mountain. What kind of prodigy could a low-tier dynasty produce? As time passed, more and more people from various dynasties arrived. Dark Nether Dynasty, Golden Sun Dynasty, Dark Witch Dynasty, Great Yu Dynasty, Ancient Cloud Dynasty, etc. In these dynasties, not only were there geniuses, but there were also many people from the dynasties, including the leaders. Almost all of them were honorables. Although they were only first and second heaven's sovereigns, it was enough to show the difference between them and low-tier dynasties. Rhino Divine Palace, Nine Profound Sect, and Saint Origin Academy had also arrived. However, they were looked down upon by others. Are these the prodigies of Saint Origin Dynasty? They even have 9 transformations Divine Soul. Really, many prodigies glanced at the Nine Profound Sect and Rhino Divine Palace and shook their heads. LV Qinghan, Chen Yi, Bai Yanji, and the other prodigies were anxious. In the eyes of these prodigies, the local prodigies of low-tier dynasties were trash. At this moment, another group of people arrived from the distance. The noisy place fell into a rare silence. Even those high-tier empires, such as Golden Sun Dynasty's Jiaoyi, Dark Witch Dynasty's Guo Qiluo, and even Great Yu Dynasty's Yu Wenji, who had a conflict with Yiguchin, had a serious expression on their faces. Their eyes were filled with fear. This sudden change in the atmosphere caused the surrounding geniuses of the other empires to be confused. The newcomers were sword sects Ta Lin, Yi Guqin, and the others. Chapter 733. It was hard to imagine that the arrival of a heaven pride from a lower empire would cause such a change in the atmosphere. The heaven prides of the other empires didn't witness it with their own eyes and naturally wouldn't believe those seemingly exaggerated rumors. But Yu Wenji, Yang Yi, and the others had seen it with their own eyes. Let alone Yi Guqin, just the strength that Gu Zun had shown was enough to sweep away all the heaven prides in the qualifiers. Then how strong was Yi Guqin, who had defeated Gu Zun? At this moment, Yang Yi, Gue Qiluo, and the others wore grave expressions. Yu Wenji's face was also a little ugly and unnatural. Thinking of the friction between him and Yi Guqin, Yu Wenji's expression stiffened. If he were to face Yi Guqin in the qualifiers, he most likely wouldn't have a good ending. The sudden change in the atmosphere also attracted the attention of the heaven prides of the other empires. Immediately, gaze after gaze converged on Yi Guqin and the others. The leader. Some of the honorables from the various dynasties looked at Feng Manlu with solemn gazes. Although his aura was only of the divine dwelling stage, it made the sovereigns feel a trace of danger. Of course, the one that attracted the most attention was Yi Guqin, who was at the front. Is that the Yi Guqin that you said can stand shoulder to shoulder with the heaven prides of the top empires? On the Vermilion Bird Empire's side, Zhu Ku cast a glance at Yi Guqin. At this moment, Yi Guqin's aura was restrained, like a deep ancient well. Just from the outside, there wasn't any sharp aura. It was just the aura of an ordinary life and death chamber. Just a life and death chamber, how disappointing. After a glance, the Vermilion Bird Jade withdrew its gaze and shook its head. Beside her, Kei Ling smiled bitterly. The senior sister of the Vermilion Bird Palace had always been very proud. But she was the only heaven prides of the Vermilion Bird Empire to break through to the spirit bridge of heaven and earth. Although it was only the second level of the spirit bridge of heaven and earth, it was enough to be proud of. The life and death chamber connected the Qi Sea and the Sea of Consciousness. The spiritual bridge of heaven and earth was a bridge between the Sea of Qi and the Sea of Consciousness to communicate with the spirit Qi of heaven and earth. The reason why spirit bridge experts of heaven and earth were able to walk in the air was because the true Qi in their bodies could communicate with the heaven and earth, allowing them to effortlessly cross the void. In addition, when using any martial arts moves, the true Qi would resonate with the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth, thus releasing a stronger power. The bridge of heaven and earth was divided into 9 sections. Every time he ascended, the spirit bridge in his body would grow longer, and the amount of spiritual energy he could borrow from the world would also double. After reaching stage 9, the heaven and earth spirit bridge would be fully formed, and at the same time, one would be able to unleash 9 times their strength. As a genius from an intermediate dynasty, Jade Suzaku indeed had the right to be proud of herself for reaching the second level of the heaven and earth spirit bridge at such a young age. Not only the Vermilion Bird Jade, but the prodigies of the other dynasties also looked at Yi Guqin with suspicion. It was hard for them to imagine how this young man, whose aura was only at the life and death threshold, could compare to the geniuses of the top dynasties. Those geniuses of the top dynasties were at least at the 5th level of the heaven and earth spirit bridge. Yi Guqin remained calm as he felt the questioning gazes. Although his strength was at the grand profound martial realm, his true Qi and soul power weren't any weaker than those at the 4th level of the heaven and earth spirit bridge. Adding in his trump cards, he wouldn't be afraid of even those at the 7th or 8th level. Gu Zun was only at the 5th level of the heaven and earth spirit bridge, which was the 9th level, with the help of the 7 Slaughter Ancient Blade. But he was still defeated by Yi Guqin. Therefore, these prodigies of the other dynasties didn't have the right to put on airs in front of Yi Guqin. Of course, Yi Guqin wouldn't care about these gazes with his personality. "Ha, Brother Yi, you're really here. I can finally see you again." A masked youth with a lazy attitude walked over. It was Kenpo. "It's Kenpo from the Sword Dynasty." The prodigies of the other dynasties looked over. As the leader of the South Horizon region's 100 Great Dynasties, the Sword Dynasty was fully deserving of its title as the #1 dynasty. As the Sword Son of the Sword Dynasty, Kenpo naturally attracted everyone's attention. But fortunately, the Sword Sons of the Sword Dynasty didn't need to participate in the qualifiers and could directly participate in the Heaven Pride battlefield. Therefore, they weren't worried about encountering Kenpo. Brother Kenpo. Yiguchin cupped his hands together. After breaking through the life and death threshold, he could clearly sense Kenpo's strength. He was probably around the Tiandi Lingxiao level, which was already very strong. Even among the Heaven Prides of the Overlord factions, only a small number of top existences like the 10 Great Young Masters were at the Divine Dwelling stage. The majority of the Heaven Prides were only at the 8th or 9th level. I'm afraid that the champion of the qualifiers will be in Brother Ye's pocket, Kenpo said with a smile. Kenpo couldn't help but sigh in admiration of Yiguchin's performance at the top of the Forbidden City. However, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. The Heaven Prides of the various empires secretly frowned. Kenpo said that a Heaven Pride from a low-level empire could win the champion of the qualifiers. Where did that place the Heaven Prides of the various empires? However, due to Kenpo's identity, they couldn't say anything to Kenpo. But unfriendly gazes fell on Yiguchin. I think the exaggerated rumors about Yiguchin should be because of Kenpo. Zhu Ku was also a little displeased. She believed that the reason the rumors were so exaggerated was because Yiguchin had a relationship with Kenpo. Beside her, Kei Ling shook her head and smiled bitterly. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. Not long after Kenpo's words faded, a faint voice sounded from afar. It seems that in the eyes of the Sword Dynasty's Sword Son, the Heaven Prides of the top empires like us can't compare to a trash from a low-level empire. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice. In the distant sky, a luxurious purple cloud ship crossed the void and came over. There was a purple flag on the ship. It's the top empire, the Ziyao dynasty. Exclamations rose one after another around the Forbidden Mountain. A group of Heaven Prides in gorgeous clothes stood at the bow of the ship. The one who spoke was a young man in purple. He had a noble aura, and his eyes were a strange purple. He looked quite extraordinary. It's the Crown Prince of the Ziyao dynasty, the top Heaven Pride, Zi Donglai. He's also a Grade 7 Heaven Pride. Rumor has it that when he was born, his body contained a ball of connate purple chi. His cultivation speed is monstrous. Some Heaven Prides had a wary look in their eyes. The name of Zi Donglai was quite famous in the nearby dozen or so dynasties. The connate purple chi in his body allowed his cultivation speed to be extremely fast, and he could manifest all kinds of martial arts. He was known as one of the most likely candidates to win the qualifiers of this year's Prodigy Battlefield. Not only Zi Donglai, but the men and women around him were also mostly at the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge realm. Looking at the hundreds of thousands of spectators, they sighed. As expected of a top empire with a false sage. The quality of Heaven Prides was indeed extraordinary. Chapter 734. The purple cloud vessel descended from the sky. Zi Donglai ignored Yiguchin and fixed his gaze on Saber 9. I didn't expect the Sword Son of the Sword Dynasty to be interested in watching the preliminaries. Unfortunately, I misjudged you, Zi Donglai said indifferently. The people of the other dynasties revered the Sword Dynasty, but Zi Donglai did not have much respect for Kenpo since they were both top dynasties and he was the Crown Prince. Of course, although they were both top dynasties, the Sword Dynasty was indeed more powerful than the Ziyao dynasty. Therefore, Zi Donglai did not go overboard with his words. Although I am wearing a mask, I can still see people clearly. My eyesight is not too bad. Kenpo shrugged and smiled casually. Oh, is that so? Since the Sword Son is so sure, how about we make a bet? Zi Donglai said. He did not look at Yiguchin the entire time, merely speaking to Saber 9 with a smile. How do we bet? Kenpo tilted his head slightly. Very simple. Let's bet on the champion of the preliminaries. If the Yi Gu Qin you speak of wins, then you win. If not, then I win. Zidong Li's eyes shone with a deep purple light as he spoke. What's the wager? Kenpo was even more curious. If the Sword Sun loses, then you have to hand over an emperor-level martial art. How about it? Zidong Li's words caused a series of gasps to be heard. Everyone's eyes fell on Zidong Li. This wager was really too much. Emperor-level martial arts were extremely rare and precious. Even in top dynasties, there were only a few of them. Zidong Li's wager of an emperor-level martial art was indeed shocking. Kenpo paused for a moment. The Sword Dynasty did not lack emperor-level martial arts, but it would not be so easily used as a wager. Unfortunately, I am not interested in the emperor-level martial arts of the Ziyao dynasty, Kenpo said honestly. After seeing the emperor-level sword arts of the Sword Dynasty, he was not interested in the emperor-level martial arts of the Ziyao dynasty. If the Sword Sun is not interested, then what about this? Zidong Li slowly raised his hand and a ball of purple qi rose from his palm and rolled in the air. This ball of purple qi did not dissipate and was extremely strange. It gave off a faint fluctuation that made the true qi of the surrounding geniuses feel like it was boiling. It's the Khanate purple qi. All the geniuses stared at the ball of purple qi. The purple qi. This purple stream of air was the foundation of Zidong Li's cultivation as a rank 7 prodigy, the Khanate purple qi. The innate purple qi was an extremely strange energy. If it was refined into one's body, it could greatly increase one's cultivation speed. It could also automatically absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into one's body. It was because of this innate purple qi that Zidong Li was able to cultivate at such an insane speed. My bet is this 1/3 of the innate purple qi. Zidong Li smiled. All the onlookers sucked in a breath. Using one's own special ability as a wager, this was a big deal. Even Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. Was Zidong Li so sure that he would not be the champion? Kenpo muttered to himself. Zidong Li continued, what's wrong? Have you lost confidence in your own judgment? I want half, Kenpo said. When these words came out, even Zidong Li's expression froze for a moment. The Sword Son of the Sword Dynasty had a big appetite. I got an emperor-level martial arts for free. So what if I have to take a little risk? Also, I am only betting that Yi Guqin will not be the champion. If anyone else wins, it will be my win. Zidong Li thought to himself. Although he looked down on the people of the lower dynasties, he was a careful person. He did not bet that he would be the champion. As long as Yi Guqin did not win, it would be his win. Zidong Li did not believe that he would not be able to deal with Yi Guqin. Taking a million steps back, even if he made a mistake or was careless, there were still the prodigies of the other top dynasties. He would not let a prodigy from a lower dynasty win. Thinking of this, Zidong Li nodded. Okay, then let's do it this way. At this point, Zidong Li and Kenpo's wager was set. Most of the surrounding prodigies sighed inwardly. Kenpo of the Sword Dynasty was probably going to give up an emperor-level martial art for free. This Saber 9 is really reckless, betting all on a life and death portal. I'm afraid Zidong Li has taken advantage of him for nothing. On the Vermilion Bird Dynasty's side, Vermilion Bird Jade shook her head and sneered. She felt that Kenpo was too reckless. Is it really for free? Vermilion Bird Ling was deep in thought. After seeing Yi Guqin's true power, she did not feel that Kenpo was reckless. After the wager was set, this qualifier became even more eye-catching. Many of the dynasty's sky prides were curious as to how capable this Yi Guqin, whom Saber 9 had taken a fancy to and who was rumored to be a god, was. At this moment, another phoenix ship came from the distance. It was the Phoenix Nye dynasty's group. A beautiful girl stood at the bow of the ship. She was dressed in red and looked like a bright flame. Her snow-white and charming face was like a seductive demon that could make one's heart waver. Who else could this naturally seductive girl be but Princess Phoenix Dawn? Beside her stood Chu Huang and the other prodigies of the Phoenix Nye dynasty. Of course, they were all led by Princess Phoenix Dawn. After all, Princess Phoenix Dawn was the daughter of Empress Phoenix Nye. Princess Phoenix Dawn was extremely eye-catching. She was a grade 7 prodigy and the #1 beauty of the Phoenix Nye dynasty. Her looks, background, talent, and strength were all not weak. Such a beauty was naturally eye-catching. The prodigies of the various dynasties also knew that such a beauty could only be seen from afar. However, just as all the prodigies were thinking this, when Princess Fengxi saw Yi Guqin, a charming smile appeared on her face. She immediately turned around and landed beside Yi Guqin like a ball of fire. "Young Master Yi, we haven't spoken much since the treasure gathering at Morning Wind Brothel. This princess misses young Master Yi." Princess Phoenix Dawn approached Yi Guqin and even placed a hand on Yi Guqin's shoulder. Her jade-like face, which was as beautiful as a fairy, also revealed a charming and innocent expression that caused one to feel pity for her. Silence, the entire forbidden Purple Mountain, which was bustling with noise, fell silent. The prodigies of the various dynasties were so shocked that their jaws almost hit the ground. The #1 beauty of the Phoenix Nye dynasty, a prodigy of the heavens, actually favored a prodigy of a low-level dynasty so much? Even the prodigies who knew some of the news were stunned. Princess Phoenix Dawn obviously viewed Yi Guqin in a different light. Princess Phoenix Dawn, before Yi Guqin could react, Yan Wushuang, who was standing beside Yi Guqin, had a frosty expression on her face. Her eyes were also filled with hatred. Yan Wushuang and the Phoenix Nye dynasty had a grudge that couldn't be resolved. As expected, Princess Phoenix Dawn's eyes flashed with mockery. Yi Guqin said that he didn't have any special relationship with Yan Wushuang. However, there was no doubt that Yan Wushuang loved Yi Guqin. Hee, this will be interesting. Princess Phoenix Dawn laughed coldly in her heart. Chapter 735. Who are you? Get away from Yi Guqin. Su Jinshi's delicate figure flashed and stood between Princess Fengxi and Yi Guqin. Her eyes, which had always been clear, were now filled with a strong sense of hostility. She was like a lioness whose territory had been invaded. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw Yi Guqin sandwiched between the three girls. Why did it feel like an Azura battlefield? Many male cultivators looked at Yi Guqin with jealousy. Princess Fengxi, Su Jianshi, and Yan Wushuang. Princess Fengxi didn't need to be praised. Su Jianshi was also pure and pretty. Her lotus-like temperament was extremely rare. Yan Wushuang was also a stunning girl. Her face was exquisite, and her legs were especially eye-catching. Even those geniuses who were used to seeing beauties couldn't help but stare at her. The three girls would attract the attention of tens of thousands of people no matter where they were. At this moment, they were all surrounding Yi Guqin. It was as if they were all jealous of each other. Princess Fengxi, I don't think our relationship is that good, right? Yi Guqin took a step back. He didn't think that Princess Fengxi was interested in him. She just wanted to use him to attack Yan Wushuang. Princess Fengxi. Yan Chang'e's expression was complicated. He did hate the Princess Fengxi for forcing his lover, Yan Wushuang's mother, to her death. But the Princess Fengxi had wasted her youth for him. It was hard to tell who was right and who was wrong. Humph. You made my mother's heart ache. I will let your daughter taste the same pain as my mother. Princess Phoenix. She glanced at Yan Chang'e coldly. Her heart was cold. Thinking of this, a charming smile appeared on her face as she approached Yi Guqin. Stay away from him. Yan Wushuang couldn't help saying coldly. She felt uncomfortable when she saw Princess Fengxi flirting with Yi Guqin. Hee. Young Master Yi is destined to serve this princess in bed. None of you can snatch him away. Princess Fengxi giggled and exhaled a fragrant breath at Yi Guqin. A sweet and warm fragrance wafted over. Yi Guchen's expression was cold. He was not afraid of strong opponents, but he was afraid of someone like Princess Feng Shi, who was difficult to deal with. He seemed to be an enemy, yet not an enemy. He seemed to be a friend, yet not a friend. He couldn't fight him, but he couldn't not fight him either. Princess Feng Shi was practically flirting with Yi Guchen. The prodigies of the other dynasties all felt that it was somewhat unreal. What kind of charm does Yi Guchen have? Isn't he just relying on Kenpo's reputation? Vermilion Bird Jade of the Vermilion Bird dynasty was also confused. Beside him, Kei Ling remained silent. She recalled that day when the young man stood alone at the top of the Forbidden City. Although he was covered in wounds, he was proud and unyielding. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed very charming. TSK, Princess Feng Shi is the Xinghong Crown Prince's chosen partner. Wouldn't the Xinghong Crown Prince be a cuckold? Everyone whispered when they saw this scene. At this time, there were two groups of people in the distant sky, driving flying boats over. It's the Sky Star Dynasty and the Wan Beast Dynasty. Some prodigies exclaimed. Speak of the devil and he will appear. The Sky Star Dynasty, Wan Beast Dynasty, Phoenix Nye Dynasty, and Purple Glory Dynasty were the four top-tier dynasties. The Great Yu Dynasty, Swallow Cloud Dynasty, Golden Sun Dynasty, and Dark Witch Dynasty were the top-tier dynasties. The remaining dynasties were the lower-tier dynasties. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty is here too. The Sky Star Dynasty and Wan Beast Dynasty had just landed when the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's flying boat arrived. Xing Li, Xing Xian, and the other princes were among the Sky Star Dynasty's group. There was also Duanmu Yu from the Duanmu family. As for the person that was surrounded by the crowd, it was precisely Crown Prince Xinghong. He glanced at Yi Guchen with a sinister look. The Xinghong Crown Prince's face darkened when he saw Princess Feng Shi circling around Yi Guchen. Feng Shi, why are you with those random people? The Xinghong Crown Prince took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Yi Guchen also looked at the Xinghong Crown Prince with a cold glint in the depths of his eyes. He had never offended the Xinghong Crown Prince, but the Xinghong Crown Prince wanted to kill him and even sent 5 Divine Palace realm experts. In Yi Guchen's heart, the Xinghong Crown Prince was an enemy he had to eliminate. If there was a chance, Yi Guchen definitely wouldn't show mercy. Hee, why can't I be with the person I like? Princess Feng Shi covered her mouth and laughed. She wasn't afraid of things blowing up. As expected, the Xinghong Crown Prince's face darkened. Yi Guchen had a headache. Princess Feng Shi was always causing trouble for him. There are some people that you can't touch. Don't think that you can ignore everything just because you have some strength. The Xinghong Crown Prince's tone was cold as he looked at Yi Guchen. I don't think too highly of myself, but there are some people that aren't worthy of me looking up to. Yi Guchen didn't want to cause trouble, but he wasn't a kind person either. Xinghong, it looks like someone doesn't put you in their eyes. On the other side, a muscular young man from the Wan Beast Empire spoke. His eyes were like the eyes of a beast, and his pupils were vertical, giving off a wild feeling. It's the Beast King of the Wan Beast Empire, Ming Ba, a 5th-level heaven and earth spiritual bridge prodigy. Some people in the surroundings looked over. Everything will be clear when the qualifiers begin. A worm can only be a worm for the rest of his life. The Xinghong Crown Prince didn't say anything else. Even the strength that Yi Guchen displayed at the top of the Forbidden City had surprised him. But the Xinghong Crown Prince was very confident in himself. Furthermore, he had the backing of a top empire and the Starry Sword Pavilion's prodigies were about to arrive. He didn't care about Yi Guchen. At that moment, the group from the Swallow Cloud Empire had also arrived at the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. The young man in the lead was tall and handsome. He was more decent than Yan Xiaotang. He was the first prince of the Swallow Cloud Empire, Yan Jiuxing. Yi Guchen looked over. His aura was much more powerful than Yan Xiaotang's. He had reached the heaven and earth spiritual bridge level and was at least a rank 4 cultivation. Yan Zhoxing nodded slightly when he saw Yiguchen looking over. Yiguchen nodded back. The atmosphere became silent again as everyone waited for the qualifiers to begin. At that moment, another group of people arrived from afar. They were all in white robes and were led by a few sovereigns. There was no lack of spiritual dwelling realm experts. The organizer of the qualifiers is here. The group of sovereign realm sky prides cheered up. Didn't they say that the overlord forces would be here? Why don't I see them? Someone was puzzled. Everyone, I am the organizer of the qualifiers. As for the overlord forces, they are still on their way, but they will definitely come. I will first announce the rules. The qualifiers will be divided into two halves. The first round will be a mixed battle. All the sky prides will be divided into the same area with a line as the boundary. They will eliminate each other. When there are 500 people left, they will enter the next round. A white-robed sovereign elder shouted. What? Only 500 people will be left in the first half? Chapter 736. The prodigies from the various dynasties were all shocked. Prodigies from more than a dozen dynasties had gathered around the forbidden Violet Mountain. There were more than 2,000 people in total. Just the first half alone had eliminated 3/4 of the participants. Furthermore, everyone knew that such a chaotic battle was the most beneficial for those from the high-tier and top-tier dynasties. This was because the prodigies from those dynasties were all of high quality. Almost all of them were at the Great Threshold or even the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge level. As for the mid-tier and low-tier dynasties, most of them were at the small threshold, and there were even some that were at the 9th transformation of the Divine Soul. If it was a chaotic battle, then the high-tier and top-tier dynasties would undoubtedly be the ones with the highest quality of prodigies. In such a chaotic battle, the prodigies of the various dynasties were practically huddling together for warmth. There would not be anyone who would fight alone. Hearing the old man's rules, all the prodigies from the top-tier and high-tier dynasties laughed. Such a situation was undoubtedly the most beneficial to them. On the other hand, some of the prodigies from the mid-tier and low-tier dynasties had ashen faces. This doesn't seem fair, some of the low-tier dynasty prodigies said. What fairness? How fair is there in this world? Furthermore, we cultivators have to use our strength to break injustice. If we don't even have the courage to do so, how can we have the guts to participate in the battle of prodigies? The old man in white snorted coldly. The supremacy's cold roar silenced all the prodigies. Yiguchen nodded inwardly after hearing the old man's words. Although the old man's words seemed unreasonable, they were indeed reasonable. Most things in the world were unfair. If one had the strength, they would naturally be able to break such injustice. I'm getting more and more interested in the battle of prodigies. Yiguchen's lips curled up slightly. Yiguchen heard that the true battle of prodigies was many times crueler than the preliminaries, but he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he was very curious. However, the surrounding prodigies couldn't help but laugh when they saw the smile on Yiguchen's face. Look, Yiguchen can still laugh. Yeah, such a chaotic battle is the most disadvantageous for him. Even if he has the strength of the legends, he won't be able to survive after offending so many top-tier prodigies. Everyone was talking about it. Ha, Yiguchen, the heavens are not letting you have an easy time. The corners of the Xinghong Crown Prince's mouth curled into a sneer. This chaotic battle was undoubtedly the best opportunity for him to eliminate Yiguchen. Ha, Sword Son, it seems that I've already won this bet. Zidonglai laughed heartily, feeling incomparably carefree. Anyone who had obtained an emperor-grade martial art for free would be in such a good mood. Kenpo muttered to himself as he frowned slightly under his mask. He did not expect the first half to be a free-for-all. This was extremely disadvantageous for Yiguchen. The results aren't out yet. It's too early to jump to conclusions, Kenpo said calmly. Ah, it seems that the sword's son won't shed tears until he sees the coffin. Then, let's wait and see, Zidong said with a hint of joy. After that, the white-robed elder divided a vast area around the forbidden purple mountain. It was enough to accommodate more than 2,000 prodigies fighting each other. Make some preparations and you can enter. Those who step out of the boundary, surrender, or have no combat power will be eliminated, the white-robed elder shouted. Those who step out of the boundary, surrender, or were beaten to the brink of death and could no longer fight were all eliminated. Hearing that, the hearts of the prodigies tightened. No one wanted to give up this hard-won opportunity. Ha, young Master Yi, join my camp. I can help you. Princess Feng Shi smiled coquettishly and winked at him. Princess, how can we let such a person join our camp? He will drag us down. Princess Feng Shi's words made the surrounding prodigies of the Phoenix Nye dynasty object in unison. The one who objected the loudest was a red-robed youth called Wang Chen. He was a rare prodigy in the Phoenix Nye dynasty and had reached the 4th stage of the Heaven and Earth spiritual bridge. Wang Chen had always admired Princess Feng Shi, but he also knew that Princess Feng Shi was not someone he could ask for. Thus, he would rather be by her side as her protector. But now, seeing that Princess Feng Shi favored Yi Guqin, Wang Chen naturally didn't have a good expression. If she favored the Xinghong crown prince, then Wang Chen could accept it. After all, they were of equal status and strength. Wang Chen couldn't compare to them. But what right did a nameless prodigy from a low-tier dynasty have to receive Princess Feng Shi's favor? Yi Guqin casually glanced around. Apart from Princess Feng Shi, no one else in the Phoenix Nye dynasty's camp was nice to him. Chu Huang, on the other hand, avoided his gaze and had an unnatural expression. She had personally witnessed the battle on the Forbidden Purple Mountain and naturally knew how terrifying Yi Guqin's combat power was. Thank you for your kindness, Princess, but forget it. It's better to rely on yourself than the heavens or the earth. Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent as he rejected Princess Feng Shi. How pretentious. How disgusting. On the other side, Vermilion Bird Jade's face was filled with disgust when she saw Yi Guqin's attitude. From her point of view, Yi Guqin was playing hard to get. He was clearly making enemies on all sides and yearned for the protection of the Phoenix Nye dynasty, but on the surface, he pretended to be aloof and refused. This kind of person was usually even more disgusting. Vermilion Bird Jade thought too highly of herself and didn't put others in her eyes. She would suffer sooner or later. All of you, stay by my side. Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment before he spoke. This battle wasn't only bad for him, but it was also bad for all the prodigies of the low-tier dynasties. Therefore, Yi Guqin wanted to at least lead the sword sex group through the first half safely. Su Jianshi nodded without hesitation. Actually, Su Jianshi could also pass through safely with her own strength, but it would be best if she could stay with Yi Guqin. Moreover, Su Jianshi felt a sense of danger. Her eyes were filled with hostility as she ground her teeth and looked at the smiling Princess Feng Shi. I can't let her get close to that silly brat, Su Jianshi said confidently. On the other side, Yan Wushuang and the others naturally wouldn't refuse. However, just as they were about to agree, a calm voice sounded out. Cousin, follow me. My Swallow Cloud dynasty is a high-tier dynasty, so we can naturally pass through this battle safely. The person who spoke was the Crown Prince, Yan Jiuxing. He had a tall figure and a handsome face. His hair was glossy, and his aura was calm. One had to admit that he had surpassed Yan Xiaotang in terms of temperament. However, there was still a gap between the two. Your Highness, some of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's prodigies wanted to say something, but they didn't. Yan Wushuang and the others' cultivation was just a burden to them. We'll be a family in the future. How can you treat us like outsiders? Yan Jiuxing waved his sleeve. Yan Xiaotang and Yan Feiling were already standing behind Yan Jiuxing. Cousin, come over. You can bring the sword sex group with you. Of course, brother Yi can come as well, Yan Jiuxing smiled magnanimously. This time, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's prodigies couldn't remain calm anymore. It was fine if he called Yan Wushuang and the others over, but he even wanted to call Yi Guqin over? Wasn't he asking for trouble? Chapter 737. Yi Guqin was now the target of everyone. He had offended 2 of the 4 top empires. The Beast King of the Wan Beast Empire, Ming Ba, had some dealings with the Xinghong Crown Prince. That was equivalent to being targeted by 3 top empires. Although the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a top empire, it could not withstand the destruction of 3 top empires. Therefore, the Sky Prides of the Swallow Cloud dynasty objected immediately. Roping Yi Guqin in was equivalent to burying a ticking time bomb at their doorstep. These Sky Prides of the Swallow Cloud dynasty finally had a chance to make a name for themselves. Naturally, they were not willing to fail because of Yi Guqin. Brother, this is definitely not possible. I'm the first to object. A young man in white robes walked out. He was somewhat handsome, but his eyes were narrow and somewhat mean. He was also a prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. His name was Yan Xiu, and his cultivation was at the first level of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge. The preliminaries were extremely important. There was no way Yan Xiu was willing to let Yi Guqin ruin the Swallow Cloud dynasty's plan. Yan Zhoxing frowned slightly when he saw that Yan Xiu objected as well. Yi Guqin laughed in his heart when he saw that. Was he already so unpopular now? He was like a plague, and those people were avoiding him like the plague. However, you guys are wrong. I, Yi Guqin, can rule the world by myself. I don't need anyone's protection. Yi Guqin thought to himself. He stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Thank you for your kindness, Prince Yan, but I won't be joining you." At least you have some self-awareness. Seeing this, Yan Xiu snorted. Sigh, if that's the case, then come over. Yan Zhoxing waved his hand. Yan Wushuang did not hesitate and stood beside Yi Guqin. Not only her, but Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the other disciples of the Sword Sect also stood beside Yi Guqin. Many thanks, cousin. However, I'll just follow Yi Guqin, Yan Wushuang said without any hesitation. Cousin, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Although Yi Guqin isn't weak, he can't even protect himself. It's impossible for him to protect all of you, Yan Xiaotang hurriedly said. He had witnessed Yi Guqin's strength, but at this moment, he didn't think that Yi Guqin could survive the encirclement of a top-tier empire. Yan Wushuang shook her head and continued to stubbornly follow Yi Guqin. Yan Zhoxing's face turned solemn as he looked deeply at Yan Wushuang and Yi Guqin. Alright, if that's the case, I won't force you, Yan Zhoxing said calmly. TSK, what kind of person is he? He actually dared to reject the first prince's kind invitation. That's right. If they follow Yi Guqin, they'll definitely be eliminated. They won't even make it past the first half. I really don't know what they're thinking. The Sky Prides of the Swallow Cloud dynasty whispered to each other with doubt and disdain. If they don't follow us, they'll only be eliminated. Yan Xiu shook her head, thinking that Yan Wushuang was blind. I really don't know where those Sky Prides from the top-tier empires get their arrogance from. Ji Ling's eyes flashed with annoyance. Forget it. Let's get ready. Yi Guqin didn't care at all. After the large area was divided, more than 2,000 Sky Prides from over 10 empires stepped into the area. The atmosphere was solemn. The white-robed elder who was in charge of the preliminaries said calmly, "Then, let's begin." As soon as the words were spoken, the atmosphere of the place turned tense. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. The crowd of Sky Prides in the arena split into smaller groups almost instantly. Most of them were from the same dynasty and faction. Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, Little Fatty, and those from the Sword Sect stood beside Yi Guqin. Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others followed Yan Zhoxing to the Swallow Cloud dynasty's camp. Yi Guqin stood there calmly. The atmosphere was very tense. Under such a tense atmosphere, some Sky Prides couldn't help but make a move. There were many grudges and conflicts between the 10+ empires. The preliminaries gave them a chance to take revenge on each other. Silly boy, are we going to make a move? Su Jianshi asked. I won't attack unless I'm attacked. However, there's someone who needs to be taught a lesson. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep as he looked in a certain direction. It was the St. Origin Academy's camp. Prince Yuanyi, Princess Yuanxi, and the others were in that group. Prince Yuanyi's heart skipped a beat when he saw Yi Guqin looking over. He had only come to the preliminaries to gain some experience. In the entire St. Origin Academy, there weren't even any sky prides at the life and death realm. The strongest ones were Prince Yuanyi and Princess Yuanxi, both of whom had reached the Divine Soul 9th transformation. Yi Guqin smiled faintly as he flew toward Prince Yuanyi. Yi Guqin, what are you doing? Prince Yuanyi gritted his teeth. He didn't expect Yi Guqin to notice him. After all, Prince Yuanyi had been plotting in the dark all this time. He hadn't clashed with Yi Guqin on the surface. Yi Guqin, outside the field, Yuan Master and the other experts of the St. Origin dynasty stood high in the sky. Seeing Yi Guqin's movement, Yuan Master clenched his fists tightly. But now, he couldn't threaten Yi Guqin. Feng Manlu and the others were still present. Do you think I don't know what you've done? Yi Guqin landed in front of the St. Origin Academy's group alone. He alone had suppressed the entire St. Origin Academy. Everyone's faces turned pale. You. What are you talking about? I don't know. Prince Yuanyi suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly. It seems like you haven't learned your lesson from the Void Sword realm. Yi Guqin's life and death aura gushed out. Yi Guqin, you're a sword master after all. Do you know how to bully the weak? How dare you bully us with your life and death chamber cultivation base? Princess Yuanxi's snow-white face was also filled with panic as she yelled. Her voice attracted the attention of many people. But when the crowd saw Yi Guqin bullying a group of 9 transformation Divine Soul Realm martial artists, they all revealed looks of disdain. Xiaoling, is this the Yi Guqin that you mentioned? How dare he bully the weak? Zhu Keyu's eyes were filled with disdain when she saw Yi Guqin. She didn't know that Prince Yuanyi was full of evil tricks. She also didn't know that Prince Yuanyi had set up a scheme to put Yi Guqin in danger. Just by looking at the surface, she concluded that Yi Guqin was bullying the weak. How ridiculous was that? Kei Ling, was speechless. She couldn't refute. Only bullying the weak? What ability does this person have to be appreciated by the Sword Sun? Zi Donglai glanced at him indifferently and then retracted his gaze. How can someone like this catch Princess Feng Shi's eye? Wan Shou Dynasty's Gong Yang grinned. Obviously, he didn't understand Princess Feng Shi's taste. Brother Xinghong, should we eliminate him directly? Prince Xingli asked Prince Xinghong. What's the hurry? Eliminating him right away is too easy for Yi Guqin. Let him jump first and then crush him. Isn't that more interesting? Prince Xinghong said with a playful look. Chapter 738. Yi Guqin didn't care about the strange and disdainful gazes around him. No one would know about the grudge between him and Prince Yuanyi. I'll retreat. Seeing this, Prince Yuanyi suppressed his anger, gritted his teeth, and was about to withdraw. However, Yi Guqin didn't give him the chance. Yi Guqin had reached the pinnacle of the Grand Xian martial realm, and his chaotic mind Si and ultimate Qi Si were connected. He could even crush ordinary heaven and earth spiritual bridge cultivators, let alone those of the same level. Facing Prince Yuanyi and the others, who were a level lower than him, it was a piece of cake. Pfft! Before Prince Yuanyi could say anything about surrendering, he was kicked hard by Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin didn't use the Xianming heavy sword, but only his fists and feet. These were real punches to the flesh, as if he was punching a sandbag. Boom! Yi Guqin punched Prince Yuanyi in the chest. His ribs were about to shatter, and the broken bones stabbed into his internal organs. Blood kept pouring out of his mouth, and he couldn't speak clearly. Bang! Yiguchin stomped down on Crown Prince Yuani's body. His limbs were on the verge of shattering. Not only Prince Yuani, but Princess Yuan Shi, Mo Lengia, Fang Chen, and the others who had a grudge against him were also treated inhumanely. Yiguchin threw out a palm strike and slapped Princess Yuan Shi's beautiful face fiercely. Pfft! Princess Yuan Shi screamed and spat out blood. Her beautiful face was swollen like a purple bun. Princess Yuan Shi was so angry that she was about to go crazy. She was the princess of a country, but she was slapped in public. Her beautiful face was twisted. Yiguchin, I want you dead. Princess Yuan Shi screamed, and her long hair danced in the wind, like a female ghost. Noisy. Yiguchin looked at her with cold eyes. He did not have the slightest bit of tenderness. He stomped down again, and stomped Princess Yuan Shi's beautiful head into the ground. If Yiguchin had not intentionally spared her life, the stomp would have crushed her head. TSK, brother Yi really doesn't have tender feelings for the fairer sex. How ruthless. But it's so satisfying to watch. On the other side, the people of the Sword Sex Tower Forest sighed, while the little fatty laughed mischievously. High up in the sky, Yuan Master's face twitched, and his aura became chaotic. His princes and princesses were being abused by Yiguchin in public. However, no matter how furious the Yuan Master was, he did not dare to act rashly. This was the preliminaries. If he were to make a move, the white-robed old man and the others who were in charge of the preliminaries would definitely do something about it. Moreover, with Feng Manlu around, the Prime Master would not dare to make a move against Yiguchin. However, the only thing that made him rejoice was that although Yiguchin was heavy-handed, he did not kill him. Boom! In the arena, Yiguchin was like a tiger in Xing Yuan Academy's camp, and no one was his match. The people of Xing Yuan Academy wanted to make a move, but Yiguchin stomped on the ground with one foot. His true chi surged, and the surrounding disciples were sent flying, making them vomit blood. Finally, Yiguchin stopped. At this moment, Prince Yuani, Princess Yuan Shi, and the others were lying in the pit like dead dogs. Their gorgeous clothes were torn, and their bones were almost shattered. Blood dripped everywhere. Princess Yuan Shi was disfigured, and her beautiful cheeks were swollen like a pig. She could not utter any harsh words. Her breathing was weak, and her delicate body twitched. Yiguchin walked to the dying Prince Yuani and said coldly, Prince Yuani, Yiguchin is not afraid of any conspiracy, but he hates flies. Do you understand? Prince Yuani's lips trembled, and a gurgling sound came from his throat. Blood kept gushing out, and he was completely crippled. Yiguchin shook his head and left. Soon, someone brought Prince Yuani and the others out of the arena. The Yuan Master was trembling all over, but there was nothing he could do. Yiguchin looked at the Yuan Master coldly. The Yuan Master took a deep breath. He knew that Yiguchin was not only taking revenge on Prince Yuani, but also warning him. The Yuan Master had sent 3 masked divine-dwelling experts in the battle after the Forbidden City, but they were all killed by Feng Manlu in the end. I'm the ruler of a country, but I'm being warned by a junior. The Yuan Master clenched his fists, but he felt very powerless. Just wait. When the Starry Sword Pavilion comes, even Feng Manlu won't be able to protect you. The Yuan Master said in his heart. No one in Xing Yuan dynasty could threaten Yiguchin anymore. But the Starry Sword Pavilion could crush Yiguchin like an ant. Yiguchin returned to the Sword Sex Talon camp. After this, Prince Yuani was almost a cripple. Even if he was still alive, he could only lie in bed for the rest of his life. It was a fate worse than death. On the other side, Prince Xingli hesitated for a moment and asked, Why didn't you save Prince Yuani? Prince Yuani persuaded him in every way possible, but he still joined them. Prince Xingli said coldly, He's just a dog. Since we've already gotten the primordial sword token, he's useless. As for Yiguchin, I'll play him to death when the time comes. That's true. Prince Xingli nodded. In the arena, a chaotic battle began. Yiguchen's attack was insignificant in the chaotic battle. Although he was crushing them, his opponents were a group of Divine Soul 9 transformations experts. This made others question Yiguchen's strength even more. In the chaos, more and more geniuses were eliminated. I think those small fries should be eliminated first. A high-tier dynasty's genius said with a playful tone. I think so too. Those mid-tier and low-tier dynasties' geniuses don't deserve to occupy the precious spots. Some high-tier dynasties' geniuses echoed with ill intentions. Now, there was a change in the situation. Those high-tier dynasties actually stopped fighting and started to expel those low-tier and mid-tier dynasties' geniuses. In their eyes, this was called cleaning up the small fries. Are you going to be eliminated by yourselves, or should we kick you out? Some high-tier dynasties' geniuses gathered together and said coldly. You're breaking the rules. Some low-tier dynasties' geniuses retorted in a trembling voice. The gap between them was too big. High-tier dynasties' geniuses were at least at the great profound martial realm. As for low-tier dynasties, there were even quite a few Divine Soul 9 transformations experts. They were not on the same level at all. No need to talk nonsense. Just attack. Next, there was a purge. Many mid-tier and low-tier dynasties' geniuses were directly kicked out of the arena. As for the Vermilion Bird dynasty, with Vermilion Bird U, a second-stage Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge genius, they were not purged. As for the 4 top-tier dynasties' geniuses, they looked at this scene with smiles as if they were watching a show. They were naturally unshakable like boulders and were destined to enter the second half. Right at this moment, Vermilion Bird U brought a group of Vermilion Bird Palace disciples and walked towards Yiguchen. There's still a bunch of small fries here. I want to see how strong this legendary Yiguchen is. Vermilion Bird U's lips curled into a mocking smile as she straightened her body. First senior sister, don't attack. Kei Ling, panicked and her back was covered in cold sweat. Vermilion Bird U wanted to attack Yiguchen. Chapter 739. Kei Ling had witnessed the battle between sword and saber with her own eyes. That was why she had a better understanding of Yiguchen's strength. He wasn't someone an ordinary Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge cultivator could challenge. As for the Vermilion Bird Jade, with her Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge cultivation, she would definitely be at a disadvantage if she offended Yiguchen. Kei Ling could ignore the Vermilion Bird Jade, but she couldn't just watch as all the prodigies of the Vermilion Bird dynasty were dragged down by the Vermilion Bird Jade. Kei Ling, aren't you embarrassing the Vermilion Bird Palace by being so timid? The Vermilion Bird Jade scolded mercilessly. But Kei Ling, still wanted to say something. The other prodigies of the Vermilion Bird Palace spoke up. Kei Ling, don't say any more. He's just a prodigy from a low-tier dynasty. Let's see how senior sister Vermilion Bird Jade crushes him. These people were all confident in the Vermilion Bird Jade. After all, being able to become a Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge prodigy in a mid-tier dynasty meant that one had extraordinary talent. No big deal. The Vermilion Bird Jade was a little smug. She didn't like Yiguchen because she doubted him. On the other hand, she believed that it was enough to have her as the only prodigy of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge who could walk out of such a low and middle-tier dynasty. How could anyone else be more amazing and powerful than her? A prodigy from a low-tier dynasty with a Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge cultivation? Didn't that mean that her Vermilion Bird Jade was inferior to him? Thus, the Vermilion Bird Jade couldn't take it anymore and was about to attack to completely destroy the rumors about Yiguchen. Sigh, do as you wish. Don't regret it when you're eliminated. Kei Ling, didn't attack and just watched with her arms crossed. Eliminate all of us. Some of the Vermilion Bird dynasty prodigies sneered. The Vermilion Bird Jade also smiled. This joke was very funny. Many of the prodigies present looked at the Vermilion Bird Jade. That vermilion bird jade seems to be going to cause trouble for Yiguchin. Interesting. I heard that Yiguchin's strength is comparable to a heaven and earth spirit bridge cultivator. Is that true? Tisk, it's hard to say. But that vermilion bird jade is already very strong. Everyone's gaze followed the vermilion bird jade. Even the top geniuses like Zi Donglai of the glorious Purple Dynasty and Yun Yang of the Eternal Universe Dynasty paid a little attention. For Kenpo to appreciate you, how capable are you? The purple light in Zi Donglai's eyes dimmed as he watched. Seeing vermilion bird jade and the others walking over, Yiguchin remained indifferent. Finally, someone made a move against him. This way, it wouldn't be too boring. Yiguchin, is it? Are you going to scram on your own, or do you want me to make a move? Jade Suzaku's eyes were cold as she lifted her chin. Do I have a grudge with you? Yiguchin wasn't angry. Instead, he was curious. He didn't seem to have offended the vermilion bird jade. People like you who flatter and bully the weak are disgusting. Vermilion bird jade's snow-white face was filled with cold disgust. What nonsense are you talking about? Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, and a few others from the Sword Sect's tower were furious. The entire dynasty knew about Yiguchin's character and he was respected by many sword cultivators. Why did it become flattery and bullying the weak in Vermilion Bird Jade's words? Ha, you're flattering the Sword Dynasty's sword son to have such an exaggerated reputation. Isn't that flattery? You relied on your great profound martial realm cultivation to ruthlessly bully those geniuses in the 9 transformation divine soul realm. Isn't that bullying the weak? Did I say something wrong? Vermilion Bird Jade crossed her arms with a cold expression. She thought that she had torn apart Yiguchin's pretense. You. Su Jianshi and the others were furious. Since when did Yiguchin flatter Kenpo? On the other hand, Kenpo was impressed by Yiguchin's strength and character, so he took the initiative to befriend him. As for bullying geniuses, how many times had Prince Yuani and the others done it? This stupid woman. Even little Fatty had a look of disdain. Although the crowd was riled up, Yiguchin remained calm and glanced at Vermilion Bird Jade. Are you done? Hmichum. So what's your decision? Vermilion Bird Jade said coldly. Do you want to scram or do you want me to do it? Yiguchin tilted his head. Vermilion Bird Jade's words were returned to her. How dare you? Everyone, eliminate them all. Vermilion Bird Jade's eyes were about to spew fire as she led the Vermilion Bird Dynasty's group over. Su Jianshi and the others were about to make a move, but Yiguchin stopped them. Let me do it, said Yiguchin. It was time for him to show off some of his skills. Otherwise, there would be more trouble for him. Yiguchin slowly raised his hand as the sea of qi in his body began to circulate. His black hair fluttered in the wind as his aura became oppressive. Stop trying to be mysterious. Vermilion Bird Jade naturally wouldn't be suppressed by this aura. She released the aura of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge and attacked. Boom! In the next moment, Vermilion Bird Jade's confident expression changed drastically. From Yiguchin's body, 50,000 cyan heaven-splitting sword souls suddenly burst out. There was no need for 108,000 sword souls to deal with this group of mid-tier dynasty prodigies. Just these 50,000 sword souls were enough to shake the world and shock the prodigies of many dynasties. What kind of skill is this? Vermilion Bird Jade's expression changed as she took out a supreme-grade dermic weapon with flames surrounding her. As a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace and the prodigy with the highest cultivation level, she naturally had many skills. Crimson Sun Mystic Flame. This was Vermilion Bird Jade's skill. It was a special flame with extraordinary power. However, the other Vermilion Bird Dynasty prodigies weren't so lucky. They were all hit by the heaven-splitting sword souls. Although they tried their best to resist, they were no match for Yiguchin. The sky was filled with people who were sent flying while spitting out blood. They were directly knocked out of the arena. Dead silence. The chaotic and noisy preliminaries seemed to have quieted down because of this scene. After Vermilion Bird Jade barely blocked Yiguchin's sword soul flood, she looked around and realized that she was the only one left. The Vermilion Bird Dynasty prodigies around her all coughed up blood and collapsed outside the arena. This. Vermilion Bird Jade's face was filled with confusion as if she couldn't wrap her head around it. One move. With just one move, Yiguchin defeated all the Vermilion Bird Dynasty prodigies. Even Vermilion Bird Jade herself could only barely block it with her special flame and heaven and earth spirit bridge cultivation. Right now, Vermilion Bird Jade was the only one left in the entire arena. No, there was still one person left. It was Kei Ling, who stood not far away and didn't make a move. Although she had expected this, her pretty face still fell into a daze. He's even stronger than before, Kei Ling said with a dazed expression. Yiguchin had gone through all his moves during this period of seclusion. His control of the heaven-ripping sword soul had also become smoother and more powerful. No, I don't believe it. After a full 10 breaths, Vermilion Bird Jade shook her head frantically and screamed with a pale face. She unleashed the power of a second-stage heaven and earth spirit bridge cultivator. Flames filled the sky, accompanied by blazing sword radiance, charged towards Yiguchin. Yiguchin didn't use the Xianming heavy sword. Instead, he used his fingers as a sword. After comprehending the one with the sword, Yiguchin's every move was filled with sword chi. The sharp sword chi gushed out from Yiguchin and collided with Vermilion Bird Jade's sword radiance. In just one exchange, Yiguchin had completely annihilated Vermilion Bird Jade's sword radiance. Go! Yiguchin activated 50,000 heaven-ripping sword souls once again and charged towards Vermilion Bird Jade. Boom! Vermilion Bird Jade wasn't willing to give up. She unleashed all her power and the Crimson Sun mystic flame once again. Do you think you're the only one with a unique flame of heaven and earth? Yiguchin sneered. The pitch-black demonic heart flame surged out. Its power was even stronger than Vermilion Bird Jade's Crimson Sun mystic flame. With a loud boom, Vermilion Bird Jade was sent flying while vomiting blood. Her palace robe was torn in many places, revealing charred skin. Stay with your companions. Yiguchin waved his hand casually. Vigorous true chi surged out. Vermilion Bird Jade's face twisted. She screamed and vomited blood again. She was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. She landed outside the arena with the other Vermilion Bird Dynasty geniuses. The entire arena fell silent. Chapter 740. It was hard to imagine that the chaotic battle had stopped because of Yiguchin's actions. If nothing else, this was simply too inconceivable. Saint Origin Dynasty, a small and remote dynasty, actually produced such a heaven's pride. He was only at the life and death threshold, but he was already at the heaven and earth spiritual bridge. He even sent Zhu Ku, who was at the second stage of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge, flying like a piece of trash. That rumor, it can't be true, right? Some of the dynasty's prodigies swallowed their saliva and looked at each other with fear. They didn't believe it at first, but after seeing Yiguchin's performance, even if it wasn't as incredible as the rumor, it wasn't far off. How many times have I told you? You just don't believe me. Zhu Keiling covered her face in shame. The Vermilion Bird Dynasty was a mid-tier dynasty, and they finally had a heaven and earth spiritual bridge Vermilion Bird Jade to compete with a high-tier dynasty. But they made a mistake and ruined their future. No, this is impossible. I don't believe it. Outside the field, Zhu Kei's chin was covered in blood. She was in a daze, and her eyes were red with madness and disbelief. The surrounding Vermilion Bird Dynasty's prodigies didn't say anything, but they couldn't hide the resentment in their eyes. To a certain extent, it was Zhu Ku who had implicated them. If Zhu Ku hadn't suggested to deal with Yiguchin, they wouldn't have made a move and ended up in this situation. Damn it, the supremacy of the Vermilion Bird Dynasty's leader's face turned green as he glared at Zhu Ku. So what if she was talented? She was so stupid that she was beyond saving. No, no. Zhu Ku shook her head as she felt the hateful gazes around her. Her face was completely pale. She had gotten into big trouble this time. Even if she returned to her dynasty, she would probably lose the treatment of a prodigy. How hateful. Zhu Ku was about to vomit blood. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she stared at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin, you've offended a top-tier dynasty. Your end won't be any better than mine. Zhu Ku's face was twisted like a crazy woman. Yi Guqin directly ignored the Vermilion Bird Jade. To him, the Vermilion Bird Jade was nothing more than a small pebble that he could easily kick away. Of course, Yi Guqin's methods also had a deterrent effect. The surrounding sky prides finally stopped looking at him as if he were trash. Although Yi Guqin's methods had intimidated a group of people, it was clear that not everyone was afraid of him. Interesting. Zidong lightly shook his head. If it were him, he wouldn't need more than a few moves to deal with the Vermilion Bird Jade. The prodigies of the other top dynasties thought the same. The chaotic battle continued. During this period of time, about half of them had been eliminated, which was about 1,000 people. Most of the remaining empires were high-tier and top-tier empires. Except for Yi Guqin. What comes next is the cruelest, Yi Guqin muttered. After the small fries were swept away, the real fierce battle began. Sure enough, after this, the battle became even more intense. Because of this, most of the remaining ones had some skills and weren't that easy to deal with. Yi Guqin looked around and suddenly noticed a group of people. A cold smile appeared on his face as he walked toward that group of people. Is Yi Guqin going to take the initiative to attack? Seeing Yi Guqin's movement, some sky prides and the crowd outside the arena focused their attention. Although Yi Guqin had cleanly dealt with the Vermilion Bird Jade, the Vermilion Bird Jade's strength could only be said to be passable. However, when the crowd saw the direction Yi Guqin was walking in, they were all surprised. He dares to provoke the Great Yu Dynasty. Some of the sky prides were stunned. The Great Yu Dynasty was a high-tier dynasty, not a dynasty like the Vermilion Bird Dynasty. In the Great Yu Dynasty crowd, a youth in a brocade robe had a dark expression and even wanted to hide in the crowd. Stop hiding and come out, Yi Guqin said calmly. The youth in the brocade robe was none other than Yu Wenji. In the Imperial Capital's sword battle dojo, Yu Wenji was arrogant and called Yi Guqin a bumpkin. After that, he even sparred with Yi Guqin and said that he would teach Yi Guqin a lesson, but in the end, he was taught a lesson. At that time, Yi Guqin originally wanted to attack, but Yan Xiaotang meddled and left the matter unsettled. Now, it was finally time to settle the score. Yi Guqin, what are you doing? Yu Wenji said forcefully as his expression changed drastically. He used to view Yi Guqin as an ant, but after watching the battle at the Forbidden City Summit, he completely withered. Yi Guqin's strength far exceeded his. Have you forgotten? I once asked you if you would participate in the preliminaries at the Imperial Capital's sword battle dojo. Yi Guqin smiled faintly. He looked very calm and composed. Hearing this, Yu Wenji's hair stood on end. At that time, he provoked Yi Guqin and even clamored for a duel, but in the end, he was stopped by Yan Xiaotang. Now, I'm here to fulfill my promise. I'm going to teach you an unforgettable lesson, Yi Guqin said with a smile. Yi Guqin, how dare you? Although Yu Wenji was slightly flustered, he looked at the person beside him and calmed down slightly. Beside him, a tall and dignified young man stepped forward and said indifferently. His face was indifferent, and his face was very similar to Yu Wenji's. If you back down now, there's still room for negotiation. This young man had an imposing aura and extraordinary strength. It's the Great Yu Dynasty's Yu Wentian, a fourth-stage heaven and earth spirit bridge prodigy. Seeing the person who stepped forward, a commotion broke out in the surroundings. As a prodigy of a high-grade dynasty, Yu Wentian was much stronger than Zhu Ku. In the heaven and earth spirit chi realm, every stage would have a huge difference in strength. You want me to back down? Yi Guqin stood with his hands behind his back, looking down on everyone. Since Yu Wentian didn't know what was good for him, there was no need for him to be polite. Big brother, help me cripple him. This person is too arrogant. Yu Wenji said with a smile. You think you can do whatever you want just because you defeated Zhu Ku? A frog at the bottom of a well, what a joke. Yu Wentian flung his sleeves and soared into the sky. The aura of a fourth stage heaven and earth spirit bridge surged out. Do all of you from the Yu dynasty speak the same way? Yi Guqin shook his head and laughed. Yu Wenji had also arrogantly said to him that there was always someone better than him. But unfortunately, the Yu dynasty wasn't considered a god in Yi Guqin's eyes. Arrogant brat, I'll subdue you with one move. Yu Wentian raised his hand and violent true energy surged out. In the heaven and earth spirit bridge realm, the higher the level, the more gaseous true energy would turn into liquid true energy. Previously, the Zhu Ku was only at stage 2, so there wasn't much liquid true energy. But now, Yu Wentian, who was at stage 4, made a move. His true energy was dense and turned into 100 feet wide crystal seal. At the same time, there seemed to be an illusory mountain range appearing and suppressing Yi Guqin. It's the Yu dynasty's King Yu's seal. I heard it's an emperor-level martial art. Seeing Yu Wentian use this move, everyone was shocked. The Yu dynasty's seal had 3 stages. When the 3rd stage was used, it was the true power of an emperor-level martial art. Although Yu Wentian had only used the 1st stage of the moving mountain seal, its power had reached the peak of an emperor-level martial art. Looks like Yu Wentian wants to suppress Yi Guqin with one move. Zi Donglai and the other top dynasty geniuses were still watching the show. They were even guessing how many moves Yi Guqin could take from Yu Wentian. I don't like it when someone is above me. Looking at Yu Wentian, who was standing high in the sky with a disdainful attitude, Yi Guqin's face was cold as he raised his hand. Boom! 108,000 swords surged out from his body like an azure dragon, roaring in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Without any suspense, the moving mountain seal was directly shattered by the flood of sword spirits. More sword spirits drowned Yu Wentian. Ah! An extremely shrill scream rang out, causing the surroundings to quiet down. The faces of the hundreds of thousands of people in the surrounding froze at the same time. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.